Chapter 465. Even if you want to die, it's hard. Qin Wushuang frowned and nodded. In her heart, she felt that there was something wrong with this sentence. But now, since Ling Xiao could see through Wu Po's illness, he should be able to wake him up, right? If Wu Po died, she would not be able to conquer the world. Cousin, hold him up. I'm going to use force. Ling Xiao nodded and smiled. The spiritual light in his hand suddenly became denser and emitted a deafening buzzing sound. The minister's eyes constricted and their hearts trembled. Damn. With this momentum, if this slap landed, not only would Qin Wushuang's heart be blocked, his head would also be slapped off, right? But just when Ling Xiao was about to slap Qin Wushuang's face with a vicious expression, he saw that young man, who was being supported by Qin Wushuang, suddenly let out a light moan and opened his eyes in a daze. Seeing this, Ling Xiao's smile became wider and he suddenly waved his hand. At the same time, his eyes flashed with panic and he exclaimed, "Not good. I can't hold it back." "Pah!" Just like this, under Qin Wushuang's shocked gaze, Ling Xiao's palm slapped out again. Although it looked like he deliberately restrained his power, when the slap landed on the face, it still caused Qin Wushuang's neck to tilt, and he spat out 2 white teeth and 3 drops of blood. Poochie. If Qin Wushuang had not held him down, this slap would have at least sent Qin Wushuang flying for a long time. Beep. The destined child's heart is filled with hatred and his heart is blocked. Congratulations to the host for plundering 300 luck points and 3,000 villain points. Hearing the notification from the system, the playful look in Ling Xiao's eyes became even more intense. However, a hint of anger gushed out from his face. I've already said that the stasis-expelling melancholy-dispelling palm that I passed down to my honored master would definitely be effective with just 1 strike. Cousin, you just didn't believe me and insisted that I give you another strike. Haha, in terms of acting skills, I'm not targeting anyone. Everyone in Xingzhou is my little brother. Hearing this, Qin Wushuang's mouth overflowed with blood and he almost fainted again. But at this time, he bit his tongue and forced himself to stay awake. Otherwise, he was really afraid that he would be slapped to death by this bastard in front of him. At this moment, he also had some doubts in his heart, and even some fear. That's right, he was unable to cultivate spiritual energy. However, with his godly soul realm, even an ordinary emperor god was no match for him. The reason why he pretended to be crippled was to hide his identity. He sat behind the scenes and played with the momentum of the world. Otherwise, once someone saw through his physique, he was afraid that he would be treated as a demon and killed before he could take his revenge. Soulless, you're awake. How do you feel? Qin Wushuang's beautiful eyes were red, and her face was full of concern. Especially when she saw the bloodstain at the corner of Qin Wupa's mouth, she felt an indescribable sense of self-blame. I am fine. Qin Wupa gritted his teeth fiercely. However, he pretended to be puzzled. How do I feel? Look at my swollen face. Isn't it clear enough? I feel great. F***CK. Big sister, what happened? Qin Wupa looked around blankly with an innocent expression. However, in Ling Xiao's eyes, this scene was truly amusing. Are you showing off your acting skills? Wupa, I also want to ask you what happened. Why did you suddenly vomit blood and faint? Coldness circulated around Qin Wushuang's body. The temperature of the entire hall instantly dropped. I don't know. I was sitting here just now when I suddenly saw a ghost figure flash before my eyes. Then I don't know anything. Qin Wupa frowned and looked somewhat terrified. What? Ghost figure? Qin Wushuang and the other officials were stunned. They could not help but feel puzzled. The great Qin Imperial Palace was heavily guarded. How could there be a ghost figure? However, just as everyone was pondering, a miserable scream suddenly came from the depths of the palace. The officials' expressions turned cold. Xiao Beifa even took a step forward and disappeared. Did a demon really enter the Qin Imperial Palace? Qin Wushuang waved her hand and shouted coldly. Seal the entire Imperial Palace. No one is allowed to leave. Yes, Emperor. When only Ling Xiao, Qin Wushuang, and Qin Wupa were left in the hall, The atmosphere suddenly became oppressive. Demon? It was obvious that the miserable scream from the depths of the palace was Qin Wupa's doing. If it were not for his dazzling luck and the system's notification, Ling Xiao would most likely believe that there were other demons in the Qin Imperial Palace. However, as a result, Ling Xiao suddenly knew how to deal with this new leak. Didn't you say that there were demons in the Qin Imperial Palace? If someone were to find out that the demon was you, Whoosh! Xiao Beifa's figure appeared from the void. He looked at Ling Xiao with a serious expression. How is it? Did you find anything? Ling Xiao's tone was calm. At this moment, he could not wait for Qin Wupa to be more ruthless and create some terrible disasters. Although he would temporarily be free from suspicion, in the future, he would bring disaster upon himself. There was a palace maid who was sucked dry. Sucked dry? Ling Xiao raised his eyebrows slightly, and his expression was extremely exaggerated. So cruel? How did you suck her dry? All the essence blood in her body was lost. Even her soul was gone. Xiao Beifa's face was gloomy. It was obvious that he was somewhat shocked and angry. Why did a demon appear in the Qin Imperial Palace on the first day that the monarch returned? Moreover, that demon's methods were strange. If the monarch did not react in time, even he would not have felt anything strange. Could it be the demon that killed the Qin Emperor's bloodline back then? Suddenly, Xiao Beifa felt a sense of guilt in his heart. Plop! Monarch, it's my fault for not protecting you well. That demon escaped. It's all right. A mere demon is nothing to be worried about. I believe that since ancient times, evil has never won over good. However, Wupa, you have to be more careful in the future. I heard that these demons like to forcefully take over those who are weak. Don't fall into their trap. Ling Xiao smiled faintly, his tone inexplicably meaningful. Then, without waiting for Qin Wupa to reply, Ling Xiao's gaze returned to Qin Wushuang. Cousin, you said just now, if I can save Wupa, you will fulfill all my requests. This, Qin Wushuang's pretty face froze. Especially that smile on Ling Xiao's face, it made her feel slightly uneasy. Of course, I will keep my word. Qin Wushuang snorted coldly. A trace of ridicule flashed across her eyes. Indeed, she was about to reveal her foxtail, right? She said that she would not fight for the throne. However, how many people could resist the temptation of being above tens of thousands of people? However, even if you were to ascend the throne and I abdicate, it would only block the mouths of the people. As long as you die one day, wouldn't the throne return to me? Wupa, don't worry. I will definitely do what I promised you. Oh, then cousin, should we choose a date first? Ling Xiao smiled gently. However, Qin Wushuang and Qin Wupa's expressions froze. Choose a date? What date? Chapter 466. Have you forgotten that I told you in the Great Zhou that we are engaged? Although my bloodline was destroyed and delayed this matter, but Ling Xiao's eyes were clear and cold. Coupled with his handsome and resolute face, he really had the temperament of a young master who had been banished from the world. I still want to tie the knot with my cousin. What? Qin Wupa's eyes suddenly widened. He actually stood up from the wooden carriage. It was true that Qin Wushuang was his physical body's elder sister. However, he was not the real Qin Wupa. All these years, he sat behind the scenes and controlled the situation in the great Qin Empire. Although Qin Wushuang was only one of his chess pieces, he would not allow others to touch her even if she was a chess piece. You don't want the empire. You want me. Qin Wushuang's red lips trembled slightly. It was the first time she looked at Ling Xiao with a complicated gaze. Originally, she thought that Ling Xiao's actions were just to hide his ambition. However, she really did not expect that he really did not love the empire. Inexplicably, Qin Wushuang developed a trace of curiosity towards Ling Xiao. That was how it was. Once a woman started to be curious about a man, she had already fallen into a trap. Silly sister, are you in love? I have everything that you like. For a cold and arrogant empress like Qin Wushuang, her tiredness towards the world was already written on her face. However, Why was she still sitting on this seat and worrying about it? Ling Xiao did not know the reason. However, she definitely had her own difficulties or reasons. Therefore, she definitely cared about the identity of the Great Qin Empire's emperor. This could be seen from the way she kept her guard up against Ling Xiao. Therefore, what Ling Xiao wanted to do was to repeatedly let her see a version of himself that did not love the empire and had no desires. This way, she would be suspicious and confused. Slowly, flaws would appear in her state of mind. As for whether she would fall in love with him or not, Ling Xiao did not care at all. What he cared about was, of course, Qin Wupa's luck. As the younger brother of Voldemort, it was naturally forbidden for him to have an elder sister. At the very least, how could an old spy behind the scenes be willing to see his puppet being held in the hands of someone else? With Qin Wupa's methods, it should not be difficult to control Qin Wuxuang. However, Ling Xiao didn't see any trace of soul imprint on the latter's body. As such, it was likely that Qin Wupa was truly greedy for this elder sister of his. His woman was snatched away in such a brazen manner. Do you think Qin Wupa would go crazy? Ah, Wupa, you only saw the second level and thought that I was the first level. Actually, I was already standing on the 10th floor. What's wrong, cousin? Is this request too much? Ling Xiao didn't even look at Qin Wupa. He was just a soul cultivator with a ghost body. No matter where he came from or what his purpose was, he didn't pose much of a threat to Ling Xiao. Not to mention the ancient Panga stone, just the bloodthirsty ghost pearl alone was enough to kill him. Of course, this required a process, or else it would truly be a waste of the dazzling luck on his body. Cousin Qin Yu, now that you've just returned to the Great Qin Empire, you're in a hurry to marry your elder sister. Isn't this inappropriate? Coldness circulated in Qin Wupa's eyes, although he was currently somewhat afraid of Ling Xiao. It was clear that there was a supreme treasure in this kid's soul sea. Just now, he didn't use his full strength. Ling Xiao looked at most 16 or 17 years old, and his cultivation was only at the divine general level. Originally, he thought that as long as he casually used some methods, he would be able to control this little prince. However, he didn't expect, as expected of that old bastard's personal disciple. Although his strength wasn't great, he had a lot of treasures on him. Even so, a mere group of Shengzhou's geniuses was nothing worth mentioning. When this young master roamed the world, he could kill god emperors with a single thought, and tens of thousands of slaves followed behind him. As for you, who do you think you are? Snatching my woman? How is it inappropriate? Ling Xiao raised his brows slightly. Who said it's inappropriate? At this moment, there were still a dozen courtiers standing in the hall. All of them had a trace of hesitation on their faces. They didn't dare to provoke Xiao Beifa and Ling Xiao. But Qin Wuxuang was the Great Qin Empire's empress after all. Moreover, judging from her expression, she seemed to be somewhat conflicted about this matter. The atmosphere in the hall gradually became tense, but a trace of soul light quietly lit up in Qin Wupa's eyes. Cough, cough. Immediately after, an old courtier let out a dry cough and smiled awkwardly with a terrified expression. Dragon Master, this is indeed a little inappropriate. Since you don't want to inherit the throne, even if you want to marry the emperor, you should be the one to Pucci. However, before the old courtier could finish his words, Ling Xiao suddenly waved his hand. A sword light suddenly tore through space, and without giving the old courtier any time to react, it directly chopped off the old courtier's head. Is there anyone else who objects? Gulp. The courtier's expressions changed drastically, especially the smell of blood that permeated the air. It made them feel endless fear in their hearts. He was killed just like that? Suddenly, the courtiers felt that Ling Xiao was right not to sit on the throne. Otherwise, once he inherits the throne, would the courtiers in the Great Qin Empire be enough for him to kill? Damn! As expected of the Blood Hall's Dragon Master, his decisiveness in killing was even better than Xiao Beifa's. Me, another loyal courtier, took a step forward with a stern expression. But this time, before he could even open his mouth, he saw another sword light sweep past his eyes. Then his head instantly fell to the ground. You, Plop! Instantly, 3 of the courtiers died on the spot. These 3 people's cultivation were even above Ling Xiao's. 2 of them were marquises, and 1 was a general. If it was a normal fight, Ling Xiao wouldn't be able to kill them, but it would take some effort. But now, all he needed to do was to close 2 fingers, bend 3 fingers, and quickly wave them. Sigh, his soul pierced through the clouds and entered the 9 heavens. As for why they were so easy to kill. Haha, since these people were in the imperial court, besides being cultivators, they were also courtiers of the great Qin Empire. There is a saying, if the emperor wants his courtiers to die, the courtiers have no choice but to die. But at this moment, Ling Xiao's gaze wasn't on the 3 corpses. Instead, he looked at Qin Wupa with a face of ridicule. Currently, there were only a few soul cultivators in the Shengzhou. In other words, very few people knew what soul skills were. Others might not know, but how could Qin Wupa's methods escape from Ling Xiao's eyes? But even Ling Xiao was a little surprised at this moment. This Qin Wupa's controlling technique was really mysterious. It was obvious that the 3 dead people were controlled by his soul consciousness. Interesting. Ghost body? Ghost clan? Ling Xiao had only seen this clan in Xia Chen's memory. Could it be that this Qin Wupa also came from the upper realm? Ling Xiao, are you planning to kill everyone who opposes you? Qin Wushuang's pretty face turned cold. If Xiao Beifa wasn't here, she would have already attacked Ling Xiao. Although, she was also murderous and cold. But compared to Ling Xiao's ruthlessness and tyranny, she was really lacking. Oh, you are indeed my woman. This is the so-called telepathy, right? That's right, Wushuang. If you kill everyone who opposes you, won't everyone agree to our matter? Ling Xiao smiled gently. His bright eyes were pure, completely different from the bloodthirsty person just now. You are ridiculous. If everyone in the world opposes you, are you going to kill everyone in the world? Qin Wushuang's eyes trembled. She suddenly remembered the rumors she heard on the way to the Great Zhou dynasty. According to the rumors, Ling Xiao moved mountains and killed hundreds of thousands of people. Maybe he really dared to kill everyone in the world. Inexplicably, Qin Wushuang's emotions became even more complicated. He doesn't want a world and wants to kill everyone just to marry me? Does he love me, or is he toying with me? You, cough cough. Qin Wupa's face turned pale. Especially when he saw the confusion in Qin Wushuang's eyes, he felt an indescribable hatred. Blood flowed from the corner of his mouth, unconsciously. Wupa, are you okay? Seeing this scene, the confusion in Qin Wushuang's eyes disappeared. She quickly reached out to support Qin Wupa, who was about to fall. Chapter 467. We'll talk about this in the future. Let me take a look at Wupa's injuries first. Qin Wushuang looked coldly at Ling Xiao. However, before the latter could step forward, Qin Wupa shook his head furiously. No need, sister. I'll be fine after some rest. F***CK. Although Qin Wupa didn't know if Ling Xiao's slap was intentional or if Ling Xiao was truly knowledgeable. However, if he were to be slapped twice more, he would probably die on the spot. Even now, he was still in a daze. All right, I'll send you to rest. Qin Wushuang pushed Qin Wupa towards the back of the palace. At this moment, Ling Xiao did not stop them. However, he did not hide the coldness in his eyes. Originally, he came to the great Qin Empire to conquer Qin Wushuang and take the empire into his hands. However, it seemed that this journey had become much more interesting. Dragon Master, you see, now that you're back, shouldn't you change your name back? Among the officials, there was a kind-looking elder who bowed respectfully. In any empire, there were always some officials who did not fear death and were loyal to their master. It was obvious that this old man was the type who did not fear death. Oh, why should I change it back? Don't you think that the name Ling Xiao is much more domineering than Qin Yu? Ling Xiao smiled coldly. The old official's face turned gloomy. Dragon Master, you are the young master of the great Qin Empire. How can you have a different surname? This is ridiculous. Just as Ling Xiao turned his head and looked at the old official, the latter's body trembled, and he almost fell to the ground. In the blink of an eye, the panic on his face had completely disappeared, and it had turned into a wisp of determination. So that's how it is. What you said makes sense. Ling Xiao nodded slightly, and the old official heaved a sigh of relief. However, before he could be happy for too long, he heard the youth in front of him suddenly say, "Then change the name of the empire. From today onwards, the Great Qin Empire will be renamed the Ling Empire. Whoever opposes, it will have their entire family executed. I'll leave this matter to you." With that, Ling Xiao no longer paid any attention to the ministers and strode out of the hall. Well, what? Hearing this, the entire hall fell into a dead silence. Everyone's faces were filled with indescribable shock and fear. Even the old official who had opened his mouth slapped himself in the face. "General Xiao, go and call one of Qin Wushuang's female servants." Ling Xiao sat in the Blood Dragon Hall. There was no one around. Soon, Xiao Beifa led a red-clothed maidservant in. "Greetings, Dragon Master. Get up, come here." Ling Xiao casually waved his hand, and the door to the hall instantly closed. The young girl walked in front of Ling Xiao while trembling with fear, feeling a little nervous in her heart. But the moment she knelt down, Ling Xiao grabbed her chin and pulled her in front of him. Then, the world suddenly plunged into darkness. "Take care of her." Ling Xiao casually threw the maidservant in the hall. From beginning to end, Xiao Beifa did not ask anything. He dragged the maidservant who had lost her mind and walked out of the hall. No wonder Qin Wushuang loved this hidden little brother so much. So it was like this. Ling Xiao raised a smile on the corner of his mouth. If he wanted to kill Qin Wushuang happily, he would have to start with Qin Wushuang. Ling Xiao already knew the reason why this empress cared so much about the throne. 10 years ago, the entire Jinan mansion was massacred. Only Qin Wushuang and his sister survived by luck. Qin Wushuang was born with a lack of a soul. His body was weak and sickly. If it wasn't for his sister's care, he most likely would have died. But it was also on that day that Qin Wushuang seemed to have been enlightened. Not only did his cultivation increase greatly, even his actions became decisive and ruthless. Not only did the Jinan mansion not decline, under her leadership, it prospered day by day. In the end, when the Great Qin was in turmoil, Qin Wushuang took the opportunity and sat on the throne. Everything seemed to be a coincidence. However, the murderer of the Jinan mansion had yet to be found. Qin Wushuang cared so much about the throne because he wanted to use this opportunity to find the real murderer. Secondly, he wanted to use the fortune of the western border to help his little brother become the ruler of the world. He wanted to be worshipped by the people and extend his life. The origin of this saying was rumored to be the guidance of an elite warrior. However, in Ling Xiao's eyes, it more or less smelled of a conspiracy. If Qin Wushuang did not have a ghost body, did not hide his strength, or did not have fortune, Ling Xiao would not suspect him. However, it seemed that he had helpers in the imperial palace. It could even be his sole slave. After all, from Xia Chen's memory, Ling Xiao already knew that this clan specialized in soul attacks. They could easily capture the soul-absorbing seed seal. Only, with Qin Wushuang's strength, most likely ordinary Emperor God warriors would not be his opponent. If so, what was he worried about? The holy sect? Or an enemy from his previous life? Originally, the people of the Ghost Clan were not from the Shang state. Therefore, this Qin Wushuang was most likely reborn or possessed. However, since he had appeared in this world, he must be related to the Shang state. However, a member of the Ghost Clan, could it be, suddenly, a soul light flashed in Ling Xiao's eyes and the bloodthirsty ghost pearl appeared before him? Could it be Xia Chun, deep inside the Qin Palace, inside a magnificent ancient palace? This place was heavily guarded by imperial guards. Currently, inside the palace, Qin Wushuang looked nervously at Qin Wushuang, who was lying on the bed. There was some sorrow between his brows. If it were not for this little brother, most likely she would have left the secular world and wholeheartedly searched for the enemy who killed her father. Their birth mother had died of illness when they were young. That year, Qin Wushuang was only 10 years old, and Qin Wushuang had just turned 1 year old. Therefore, since young, the two of them had grown up with their father. However, 10 years ago, their father, a fifth-stage emperor god, had mysteriously died in his bedroom. Although his body was unharmed, his divine soul had been destroyed. It was extremely strange. Not only that, hundreds of living creatures in the Jinnin mansion had also died in such a state. In these years, Qin Wushuang had searched the entire Great Qin Empire but could not find a single clue. It was as if the person who had slaughtered the Jinnin mansion had disappeared into thin air. If it were not for the fact that he was worried about his little brother, Qin Wushuang would not care about the state affairs. "Wushuang, are you feeling better?" Qin Wushuang gave a light sigh and reached out to pull the cotton blanket on the bed. "I am fine, sister." A trace of gloominess flashed across Qin Wushuang's face. "Only, sister, are you really going to agree to that Ling Zhao's request? How could it be?" A trace of panic flashed across Qin Wushuang's eyes. Currently, she felt somewhat conflicted. This young man's methods were terrifying enough. Now, he was in charge of the Blood Dragon Hall. If she could borrow his hand to unify the west border, perhaps she could solve Wushuang's illness as soon as possible. However, inexplicably, Qin Wushuang felt that this young man was very dangerous. This feeling of being out of control made her somewhat hesitant. After all, if she was not careful, she might lose both the state and her body. However, Wushuang, with him, perhaps we can complete the task of unifying the west border faster. By that time, your illness, you dare. Suddenly, Qin Wushuang shouted angrily and sat up from the bed. He stared at Qin Wushuang with a gloomy gaze. Chapter 468. Wupa, what happened to you? Qin Wushuang looked at Qin Wushuang, who suddenly sat up with a surprised expression. For a moment, she even felt that the person before her was not her little brother. In Qin Wushuang's eyes, although Qin Wushuang had a weak body, he was a gentle and optimistic young man. But just now, what was with the resentment in his eyes? Nothing. Sister, you can't marry that young man. I suspect he is related to father's death. Qin Wushuang took a deep breath and suppressed the anger in his heart. In the end, he still cared about Qin Wushuang. After all, this elder sister had been taking good care of him since he was young. For ordinary puppets, he only needed to place a soul seal, and he could control them completely. Although there was a risk of being exposed, no one would notice as long as he was careful. However, he did not make a move on Qin Wushuang. In the beginning, it was because he was not strong enough. Later, he suddenly could not do it. Originally, Qin Wushuang thought that this reluctance was because it was unnecessary. Qin Wushuang had always listened to him. Why should he take the risk to place a seal on her? But now, this sudden appearance of Ling Xiao made him understand. Perhaps, in these 30 years of living together, he seemed to have fallen in love with this cold and heartless sister who gave all her warmth to him. That kind of warm and meticulous care caused his heart, which had been cold for hundreds of years, to gradually crack. The people of the Ghost Clan had always been treacherous. However, it did not mean that they had no feelings. After planting the soul seal, Qin Wushuang would no longer be himself, but a puppet. This way, he would lose a lot of fun. As for unifying the west border and helping him extend his life, it was an excuse that Qin Wushuang had directed and acted out. His goal was to guide Qin Wushuang to conquer the world for him and destroy that person's descendants. Besides, he already knew that there were very few soul martial artists in the Holy Land, and his identity was indeed special. Once exposed, with his current strength, it would be difficult for him to survive in the human territory, not to mention returning to his own world to take revenge. Hiding behind others and controlling the world was the self-cultivation of a demonic genius of the Ghost Clan. It was rumored that a predecessor of the Ghost Clan had used his soul to control a world without anyone noticing. Ling Xiao. Humph. Even if you have a treasure to protect your soul, it is just a matter of waving my hand to kill you. What? Qin Wushuang's face slightly froze. Spiritual qi surged out of his body almost uncontrollably. Wushuang, how did you know? Sister, you forgot. Back then, when father was killed, his divine soul had disappeared. Today, when that palace maid was killed, her blood soul had also been sucked dry by someone. However, it just so happened that right after that Qin Yu arrived, demons appeared in the Qin palace. Don't you think? Don't think this is too much of a coincidence? Qin Wu sighed softly. His eyes were filled with worry. But, he was clearly in the palace. Why did he? Qin Wushuang frowned and showed a confused expression. She had always believed Qin Wu's words. However, today's matter was too strange. She couldn't understand Ling Zhao's intentions. Sister, if Qin Yu was the real culprit behind his father's death, he must have a purpose for coming to the great Qin imperial palace. But before that, he must try to hide his identity. With Xiao Beifa's strength, what kind of evil could escape from under his nose? Obviously, there must be something fishy going on. Qin Wushuang shook his head. His tone became more serious. Look, didn't he succeed? If even you can't figure it out, then, in the future, if there are demons in the great Qin palace, who will suspect him? Qin Wushuang's beautiful eyes narrowed. She nodded blankly. Wushuang, you are smart. You can always see the problem so clearly. Sister, we have to be careful. Since Qin Yu put on such a show, he must have a motive. I suspect that there are other demons behind him. Sooner or later, they will make a move on us. At that time, it will be hard for the great Qin palace to not fall into his hands. Qin Wushuang snorted coldly. His face was full of arrogance. A mere ant from the first level dares to play tricks with me? When I roamed the world, all the demons in the upper realm had to bow down to me. In terms of scheming, I, Qin Wushuang, am not targeting anyone. Everyone in Xingzhou is my younger brother. Why do these words sound so familiar? I know, sister. You must be thinking that he doesn't care about the throne. Haha, sister, have you thought about why he wants to marry you? Wushuang, you mean a man's mouth is a liar? In this world, other than your family, you can't trust anyone else. That Qin Yu is just worried that the great Qin palace will fall into chaos. That's why he chose the safest way to rule the great Qin palace. If you marry him, it will save you a lot of trouble. If you don't marry him, I'm afraid that us siblings. Qin Wushuang sighed deeply. However, there was a hidden smile at the corner of his eyes. Qin Yu, no, I should call you Ling Xiao now, right? Don't you want to marry Qin Wushuang? Dream on. Wushuang, I only trust you. However, now that Xiao Beifa has sided with him, what should we do? Qin Wushuang didn't know how his little brother came up with such a profound lesson. A man's mouth is a liar? Could it be that his little brother had experienced it before? That shouldn't be the case. Sister, don't be anxious. He has the blood dragon guards. It's not like we don't have any trump cards. However, looking at the situation, it's better to strike first and gain the upper hand. Wushuang, let's wait a bit more. It's too obvious to kill him now. Once the blood dragon guards discover it, I'm afraid that the great Qin palace will fall into chaos. Let me think about it. Qin Wushuang sighed lightly. Her brows were filled with coldness. Qin Wushuang had lived in the palace for a long time. Thus, she didn't know how frightening Ling Xiao was. She had personally witnessed that youth beheading divine emperors with a single slash. Furthermore, what caused Qin Wushuang to fear the most was that youth seemed to possess the ability to travel through space. Such a person, one should either not provoke him or kill him in a single strike. Otherwise, there would definitely be no end of troubles. Sister, seeing the hesitation in Qin Wushuang's eyes, Qin Wushuang's expression immediately grew gloomy. If we continue to wait, are you not afraid that he'll kill us? It's all right, Wushuang. I'll first pretend to agree to his request and set up the marriage contract to stabilize him. Then we can slowly plan. Qin Wushuang's beautiful eyes were overflowing with coldness. The hatred of killing one's father was absolutely irreconcilable. After listening to Qin Wushuang's analysis, she also felt that something was wrong with Ling Xiao. However, if she wanted to kill him, she couldn't be careless and hasty. She had to come up with a detailed and meticulous plan. For example, she could drug him on the day of the wedding, stab him in the waist when he least expected it, or even, as long as she could avenge the Jinnan mansion and her father, even if she had to sacrifice herself, she wouldn't even frown. It was said that when a man was the happiest, he would be the most relaxed. Thus, if she wanted to kill a young demon who could travel through space at will, she had to choose the safest method. Chapter 469. Sister, what did you say? Qin Wupa's expression froze almost instantly. When he saw the seriousness on Qin Wushuang's face, he almost condensed the soul seal and controlled her completely. With Qin Wupa's current strength, almost no one below the God Emperor realm could be his opponent. Even God Emperors, those who did not guard against him, could be easily dealt with. Only for someone like Xiao Beifa, who had been killing for years and comprehended the Tao laws, or a high-grade God Emperor, it was extremely risky to control him. This was the reason why he appeared before outsiders as a piece of trash. Regardless of who it was, when they saw an elite warrior of the same level as them, they would be on guard. However, when you saw a pig, an ant that you could crush with a stretch of your hand, would you be afraid? Of course not. This was the so-called pretending to be a pig to eat a tiger. Only Qin Wupa was pretending to be a pig, not a coward. How could he be willing to lose his woman? Wupa, don't worry. I know what I'm doing. Just focus on recuperating and don't worry about anything else. Qin Wushuang smiled gently. In her eyes, as long as her brother could be healthy and happy, it would be her only motivation to live. As for Ling Xiao, she still had to probe him and figure out his background. Then, she would think of a way to get rid of him. Or else, the risk would be too great. A young man who could make Ning Tiance and Xiao Yinli bow. How could he not have some tricks up his sleeve? Before Qin Wupa could speak again, Qin Wushuang had already covered him with a blanket and turned to walk out of the palace. Sister, Qin Wupa gritted his teeth and the soul light in his eyes surged violently. At the same time, inside his soul palace, Qin Wupa arrived in a flash and stood with his hands behind his back. He looked coldly at the blood-colored palace before him. This palace was 300 meters tall and overflowed with bloodlight. Ghost patterns covered it and revealed a heart-palpitating evil. For ordinary first-grade God Emperors, their soul palaces were only 300 meters tall. Clearly, the strength of this ghost clan member's divine soul was far beyond that of a God Emperor. This was what he relied on and where he had the confidence to pretend to be a pig. When Qin Wupa's figure walked into the palace, the world before his eyes suddenly became clear. At the end of the blood-colored palace, 9 stone pillars were arranged neatly. Among them, there seemed to be figures standing on 5 stone pillars. Their bodies were bound by blood chains and appear extremely strange. But what was even more terrifying was that the aura emanating from these 5 souls was actually at the Emperor realm. When they were alive, they were definitely experts who could intimidate the heavens and the earth. Da-da-da. Hearing the sound of footsteps, one of the old men slowly raised his head. His wrinkled face clearly flashed with resentment and anger. Hihi Danlao, what do you think? Qin Wupa walked in front of the old man with a sinister smile on his face. The latter snorted coldly and closed his eyes. Old Dan, why haven't you said anything yet? I know that you've sealed the spiritual flame in Qin Yu's body. As long as you're willing to tell me how to seal the spiritual flame, I'll definitely set you free. What do you think? A cold glint flashed across Qin Wupa's eyes. The old man in front of him was naturally the famous Pill Emperor of the Great Qin Empire. At that time, during the incident in the Qin Palace, he sealed the spiritual flame in Qin Yu's body with all his spiritual energy, but his own level fell to the Pong stage. Originally, the Pill Emperor had planned to find a place to hide and recover his cultivation with spirit pills. But he didn't expect the enemy to find him so quickly. Nonsense, how could he not be quick? With Qin Wupa's divine soul techniques, it was extremely easy for him to find out Qin Yu's whereabouts. As for the rebellion of the various court officials, it was naturally planned by him. First, he killed his own father and refined him into a slave. Then, he used the several hundred living beings of the South guarding Prince's mansion as a sacrifice to break through to the first stage of the God King stage. Secretly, Qin Wupa used his soul control technique to control several court officials of the Great Qin Empire. Using them as bait, he planned this rebellion. As for that spiritual flame of heaven and earth, it could be said to be a pleasant surprise. Such a divine item, even in his realm, it could be said to be a precious treasure. What was originally a flawless plan had a flaw in the end. The Qin palace was in turmoil. The Pill Emperor, that old bastard, actually received the news and sent Qin Yu away from the Qin dynasty. However, what caused Qin Wupa to be pleasantly surprised was that this old bastard actually knew how to fuse the spiritual flame into his body. The people of the Ghost Clan had extremely weak bodies to begin with. There was nothing they could do about it. The Great Tao was fair and balanced. The innate talent of the divine soul caused every expert of the Ghost Clan to be proficient in divine soul slaughtering. However, it just so happened that among the 10,000 clans, the Ghost Clan's body was the weakest. However, if one were to be able to fuse with a spiritual flame of heaven and earth, then one's body would definitely reach a frightening level. Qin Yu, an ant from the lower realm. 3 years ago, he was only at the Pong stage or even lower. How much stronger could his body be compared to his own? Indescribably, Qin Wupa felt that this was a fortune bestowed upon him by the heavens. Merely, what caused him to feel strange was that after Qin Yu left, it was like a clay ox entering the sea. There was no longer any news of him. In these 3 years, Qin Wupa had used countless methods to force the Pill Emperor to tell him the whereabouts of Qin Yu and a method to fuse with the spiritual flame. Who would have thought that not only did this old bastard not relent, he even placed a barrier in his own soul sea. Once his soul was forcibly searched, his soul sea would immediately shatter. Needless to say, alchemists had a lot of methods. In your dreams, sooner or later, you will be exterminated. The Pill Emperor's expression was indifferent. He was not moved in the slightest. In these 3 years, he had personally witnessed Qin Wupa's strange methods, especially the stone pillar that bound him. It was even more bizarre and evil. Not only could it seal his soul power, it also seemed to be able to devour his cultivation to nourish Qin Wupa's soul palace. In a short 3 years, Qin Wupa had stepped into the 5th stage of the Divine King realm from the 1st stage. As for the remaining 4 soul shadows, they were all Emperor God experts that he had trapped in this place. Ha, old bastard, do you really think that just because you placed a seal in your soul sea, I can't do anything to you? To tell you the truth, the Divine Codex that I cultivate is a classic from the upper realm, the treasure of the Ghost Clan. Wait until I step into the Emperor realm. I will be able to break your little tricks with a wave of my hand. At that time, Qin Wupa smiled coldly. The entire Blood Palace seemed to be filled with ghostly shadows. It was extremely sinister. Then you'll have to be alive to break through to the God Emperor realm first. Pill Elder's eyes narrowed. A sense of helplessness appeared in his heart. Counting the time, it had already been 3 years. According to the plan, Xiao Beifa should have already led his troops back to the capital. Back then, the reason why the Qin Emperor sent Qin Yu out of the palace was because the heavenly official had predicted that the Great Qin would face such a calamity. As long as the Blood Dragon Temple was not destroyed, Xiao Yu should still have the chance to defy the heavens and change his fate. After all, according to the Qin Emperor, Qin Yu was the hope of the Qin clan's prosperity. He was a person that was protected by the heavens and earth. This point could be seen from his physique and the matter of him fusing with the spiritual fire. This Qin Wupa was very powerful. His methods and scheming were all monstrous. However, as long as Xiao Yu fused with that exceptional ominous fire and took control of the Blood Dragon Temple, it was not impossible for him to fight against him. The spiritual fire of heaven and earth was extremely strong. It was the best treasure to restrain such devils. Laughable, he actually wanted to take that spiritual fire for himself. Wasn't he afraid of being burned to death? Chapter 470. Old Dan, you don't have to worry about this. My destiny is not in this world. Thus, the god emperors and divine masters in your eyes are not even worth mentioning in my eyes." Qin Wupa's expression was gloomy and cold. With his experience, how could he not know about the might of the heaven and earth's spiritual flame? However, why was it said that this world was his fortune? His original body was a ghost. However, his soul was currently in a human body. Thus, as long as he could grasp the method, he might be able to fuse the spiritual flame into his body. "Oh, that's right. Old Dan, I came to inform you of a matter. Your precious disciple has returned." Qin Wupa smiled sinisterly. Instantly, old Dan's body trembled. He felt an indescribable chill in his heart. "Little you finally returned?" Although he had been looking forward to Qin Yu's return for the past 3 years. However, when he saw the ridicule on Qin Wupa's face, he suddenly felt a bit nervous. After all, this demon was hiding in the dark. No one knew of his existence. Furthermore, before Qin Wupa revealed his true appearance, he had never heard of this name. This was the most frightening part. A demon that was proficient in soul techniques and full of scheming actually did not reveal any clues. Even if Little Yu was the one chosen by destiny, he was still a bit childish and weak compared to Qin Wupa. Damn it, how should he warn Little Yu? Furthermore, we've already fought. Old Dan, the divine soul defensive treasure that you left for him, is pretty good. However, I'll let you see with your own eyes how I kill him. Qin Wupa raised the corner of his mouth into a playful smile. At that time, if he used Qin Yu's life as a threat, would this old bastard still be as stubborn as he was now? "You dare! Qin Wupa, you'll regret this!" Old Dan shouted angrily. However, a trace of doubt flashed through his face. Divine soul defensive treasure? Fuck, I don't seem to have passed down such a treasure to Little Yu. Could it be that he had a fortuitous encounter in these past 3 years? That's right, that must be the case. No wonder Qin Emperor had said that his son Qin Yu had the bearing of an eternity. Who would have thought that Little Yu would be able to obtain a fortuitous encounter during this period of seclusion? Divine soul defensive treasure? Haha, Qin Wupa, let's see what other abilities you have. Suddenly, tears welled up in Elder Dan's eyes. "Little Yu, stand up." "Regret? I've only regretted once in my life, and that was trusting someone." Qin Wupa turned around, leaving behind a resolute back view. "Therefore, this time, I will exterminate all those who obstruct me. If people try to stop me, I will kill them. If the heavens try to stop me, I will punish the heavens." Oh. Old Dan clenched his teeth, but didn't say anything in the end. The only thing he could do now was to guard the secret of the spiritual fire to his death. Otherwise, if Qin Wupa were to find out about it, Xiaoyu would definitely die. As long as he was not confident, he would definitely not dare to act rashly against Xiaoyu. In the great Qin imperial harem, Qin Wupa stood with his hands behind his back as he looked up at the sky. His current priority was not to seize the spiritual fire from Ling Xiao, but he must think of a way to make Qin Wushuang believe that Ling Xiao was a devil. This way, she wouldn't have to hesitate anymore, and she wouldn't need to use her body to tie him down. Xiao Beifa was indeed a little overpowered. In a direct confrontation, Qin Wumao had no chance of winning. However, he still had 4 soul slaves imprisoned in his soul palace, and each of them was at the God Emperor level. Although he had lost his physical body, and his combat strength was greatly reduced, it shouldn't be a problem for him to kill Xiao Beifa if they worked together. However, the price to pay for doing so was too great. Not only were the 5 God Emperors of the Soul Palace his slaves, they were also nourishment for his breakthrough. In the past 3 years, their cultivation had dropped by several levels due to the absorption. Currently, he would either not be able to kill the great Qin's God Emperor, or he would only be able to use someone like Qin Wushuang. Killing Xiao Beifa would mean losing 4 soul slaves. No matter how he thought about it, it wasn't worth it. Not to mention, the 4 soul slaves were all famous people in the great Qin Empire, and one of them was his old father. Once he was exposed, he would be in a passive position in this chess game. Therefore, the safest method was to have Qin Wushuang send out experts. As long as Qin Wushuang was willing to disregard everything, Ling Xiao would definitely die. She also had two loyal subordinates, and one of them had even reached the sixth-stage God-Emperor realm. Strangely, from a moment he saw Ling Xiao today, Qin Wushuang felt uneasy. He couldn't be at ease if Ling Xiao wasn't eliminated. What should I do? I know. Suddenly, a smile appeared on Qin Wushuang's face. Judging from the current situation, Xiao Beifa would definitely protect Ling Xiao day and night. Therefore, he most likely wouldn't have much of an opportunity to kill Xiao Beifa. However, just because he couldn't kill Ling Xiao, it didn't mean that Ling Xiao couldn't kill him. In the current world, there was only one thing that could make Qin Wushuang disregard everything, and that was his own death. As long as he could push the blame onto Ling Xiao, Qin Wushuang would definitely be furious, and he would no longer fear Xiao Beifa. Now that he had a reason, what was wrong with killing a young master? The Blood Dragon Holy Palace? He did not make a move against the most mysterious powerhouse of the Great Qin dynasty. After all, it was rumored that when this group of people entered the palace, they had sent a strand of their divine soul into the soul tablet. He was afraid of alerting the enemy. However, if he was given some more time to step into the Emperor realm, it would be meaningless to stop him. Ling Xiao would kill him, and Qin Wushuang would take revenge for his brother. This excuse could shut the mouths of the officials of the Great Qin dynasty. So what if Xiao Beifa did it? He was an accomplice of the ghost demon, and most likely, he was the culprit that killed the Emperor clan. As long as Qin Wushuang instigated it slightly, Ling Xiao's identity as the young master might not be convincing. After all, no one knew the methods of the ghost demon. Perhaps that Ling Xiao was a puppet controlled by someone? This way, even if Xiao Beifa did, most likely he wouldn't betray him, right? He was already dead. How could he betray him? This was the so-called killing two birds with one stone. Next, it would depend on how he would lay the foundation and perform. As for how he would come back from the dead, haha, what's there to be reluctant about with a useless physical body? As long as Ling Xiao died, he would seize the spiritual fire and think of a way to pry open Dan Lao's mouth. Then, he would seize a strong physical body and merge with this divine object. When he returned, he would no longer be Qin Wushuang, but the Great Qin dynasty's emperor, Qin Wushuang's husband. After enduring for 30 years, everything was ready. In this world, who could stop his hegemony? However, in the end, Qin Wushuang still underestimated the Blood Hall's loyalty to the Dragon Master. In other words, he didn't expect that the Blood Dragon Temple was only a force in Ling Xiao's hands. Even Qin Wushuang didn't fear the Blood Hall, but Ling Xiao himself. However, in Qin Wushuang's mind, Ling Xiao was Qin Yu, a human ant that had lived for 3 years to avoid disaster. If he didn't have Xiao Beifa's protection and the spiritual treasure bestowed by Dan Lao and his soul sea, he wouldn't have to spend so much effort. However, when he thought of the moment when his divine soul was shattered, Qin Wushuang still felt an indescribable fear. Most likely, the treasure in Ling Xiao's soul sea was not simple. Chapter 471. In the center of the western border, on a huge mountain full of spiritual aura, Xia Feng was practicing his sword techniques on the martial arts field with the other disciples. Although he had not left the mountain for the past few days, he had heard about the major events that had happened in the western border from some well-informed disciples, especially the name Ling Xiao, which caused his heart to be filled with resentment. Finally, he had come. But what made Xia Feng a little surprised was, how did this true demon get together with Xiao Yunli? Of course, this was not important in Xia Feng's eyes. After all, there were still a few months before the Cold Moon Celestial Palace's secret realm opened. When everyone entered the secret realm, their cultivation would be suppressed to the same level. Now, he was already a third-grade divine general. The immortal gold that the Lord had given him was really mysterious. It could actually draw the spiritual aura of heaven and earth into his body. Every night, when it was quiet, Xia Feng would use this item to cultivate. His cultivation had advanced by leaps and bounds. Humph! So what if you have the true demon's physique? I'm afraid your current cultivation level is only at this level, right? Moreover, according to the rumors, the divine envoy of the holy sect had arrived at the western border and had found a peerless demon of the western border as their spokesperson. This news was extremely confidential. Even the disciple who had spread the news only knew a little about it. He did not know who the lucky demon was. Presumably, when the secret realm opened, this peerless demon would definitely appear. Given the holy sect's hatred for demons, as long as he secretly cooperated with this person, wouldn't it be more than enough to kill Ling Xiao? Of course, Ling Xiao had ordered Han Qingqiu to spread this news in a small area. There was a mark on Xia Feng's body. Naturally, Ling Xiao knew where he was clearly. The reason why he did this was to make it easier for him to toy with him in the future. According to Ling Xiao's understanding of Xia Feng, since this child of destiny knew his secret and had been hiding it in the bottom of his heart, it was not out of kindness. Instead, it was because he had not found a suitable opportunity to deal with him. Therefore, he schemed and gave himself the identity of the divine envoy of the holy sect. In this way, he could intimidate the Cold Moon Celestial Palace Master and toy with the child of destiny. What? Junior brother, you said that Ling Xiao is a demon? F***CK. Do you mean that the Oracle is also a devil? Hee. Do you think that you're looking down on me from the first level after your rebirth? Actually, what you saw was what I wanted you to see. In my eyes, you can't even be called an ant. You're still alive because you haven't exhausted all the light and heat in your body. Look, it's Junior Sister Han. The originally quiet martial arts practice field suddenly became noisy. All the disciples of Cold Moon Immortal Palace stopped what they were doing and looked towards the distant mountain. At that moment, a figure in a long white dress walked over slowly. She looked like a fairy from a painting. Junior Sister Han is simply too beautiful. What nonsense are you spouting? Was the title of a #1 beauty of the Western frontier a joke? Junior Martial Sister Han. I am willing to call her the most beautiful. Junior Sister Han. In my eyes, you're the most beautiful, eh? Every look in your eyes makes me drunk. Hey, what are you looking at, you ugly piece of shit? Hurry up and get away from me so that you don't scare Junior Sister Han. In the crowd, someone suddenly shouted coldly, instantly attracting everyone's attention. However, when everyone saw that face full of scars, the corners of their mouths raised into a thick smile of disdain. Xia Feng's eyes narrowed slightly, but in the end, he did not say anything and turned to walk towards the corner. In order to avoid the trace of uneasiness in his heart, Xia Feng had already destroyed his entire face. In fact, he did not even think of using pills to change his appearance. After all, Cold Moon Immortal Palace had a lineage that specialized in alchemy, so they might be able to see the changes in his appearance. Only by destroying his appearance could he be absolutely safe. Of course, he had to eliminate all hidden dangers. Laugh all you want. In this world, women only look at appearance. Men will always look at strength. One day, when I stand at the top of the sky, you will all kneel down and call me father. But just as Xia Feng was pondering, a strange fragrance suddenly floated in front of him, and the originally noisy martial arts practice field inexplicably fell into a dead silence. When Xia Feng raised his head and saw that picturesque face appear in front of him, his face had already become completely lifeless. You are Junior Brother Feng Yi? The corner of Han Qingqiu's mouth raised into a beautiful arc, and her beautiful eyes had a hint of curiosity, like a star in the night sky, shining and charming. Han, Senior Sister Han. At this moment, Xia Feng suddenly panicked and even felt a little shy. In his heart, he had never seen Qiao Shuang as his woman, because the person he loved from the beginning to the end was this fairy from the Cold Palace. In his previous life, when the secret realm opened, he saw this beautiful figure from afar like a breeze in the mountains. But at that time, Xia Feng was not the crown prince of the great Xia dynasty, and was not even a prince of the main bloodline. He was just a foil to the era, the background of those so-called destined people. Therefore, Han Qingqiu's gaze never stopped on him for a breath. Until he was killed, He had only heard that Han Qingxiu was cold by nature and hated demons the most. But unfortunately, she had a close relationship with Ling Xiao, and they had a good impression of each other. But that demon was cruel and murderous. How could there be true feelings? He had bewitched Han Qingxiu because he wanted to use her as a guide to find the fortune in the secret realm. This was not his guess, but what the demon said when he killed him. Even to this day, Xia Feng could still remember the savage and sinister smile on that sinister face. Qingxiu, don't worry, since the heavenly Tao has asked me to be reborn, this time, I am willing to try to protect you. As long as there is a chance, I will kill that demon and not let him have the chance to hurt you. If there is no chance, I will also think of a way to remind you. You are Marshal Aunt Yu Zhao's new disciple, right? I heard that you have comprehended the Golden Age Tao Law. Your cultivation is at the divine general realm? Han Qingxiu looked at Xia Feng with a smile that was not a smile. Before leaving, Ling Xiao had asked her to pay attention to the divine general youth who had comprehended the Golden Age Tao Law. Originally, Han Qingxiu thought that the person who Ling Xiao mentioned must be an enemy that he wanted to kill. After all, someone like him probably did not have any friends to speak of. But to Han Qingxiu's surprise, not only did Ling Xiao not ask her to get rid of this person, he even asked her to do her best to help him raise his position in the sect. Of course, with Han Qingxiu's experience, she could not guess what Ling Xiao was thinking. This is a reborn person. Ling Xiao already knew that Cold Moon Immortal Palace had an ancient secret realm that contained a secret to becoming an immortal. No matter how Xia Feng had died in his previous life, he must know some secrets that ordinary people did not know. But the prerequisite was that he had to enter the secret realm. There were at least 3,800 disciples in Cold Moon Immortal Palace, if not 4,000. Xia Feng had just entered the sect. Even if his talent was terrifying, did you think that as long as you had strength, you would be able to get good resources? What a joke. Of course, only those with a strong background would have a chance. Han Qingxiu was the successor of Cold Moon Immortal Palace. With her help, Xia Feng would definitely be able to get a spot. This way, this child of destiny would have a chance to show off his might. Xia Feng, no need to thank me. Chapter 472. Senior sister. I am. Xia Feng lowered his head nervously. Ever since he came to Cold Moon Immortal Palace, he had been looking forward to meeting the fairy of his dreams. In fact, there were many times when Xia Feng felt that the reason he was reborn was not because he hated Ling Xiao. It was because he could not forget Han Qingxiu. The humbleness of his previous life should have been swept away. He originally planned to become the crown prince first, and then come to Cold Moon Immortal Palace to see Han Qingxiu. But who would have thought that Xiao Shuang and Sikong Hui, those two bitches, would make him bear the name of a demon? In a night, he lost his identity and became a real demon that was reviled by everyone. He hated it. He hated that he could not go back to Great Xia and kill the Sikong clan, the empress, and his two brothers. But forget it. What should be done will be done. Han Qingxiu is really good, but I can only have her if I am alive. Originally, Xia Feng thought that he would only have the chance to stand in front of Han Qingxiu if he found the heavenly fortune in the secret realm. But he never dreamed that today, his fairy would take the initiative to walk towards him. Damn, is this the so-called extreme misfortune, where there are gains and losses? Haha, I heard from Master that junior brother is talented. Senior sister thinks highly of you. Maybe you can explore the secret realm with junior brother in the future. Han Qingxiu smiled faintly. Although it was just a normal encouragement, it made Xia Feng's face turn red with excitement. Qingxiu, are you serious? Are you willing to damn? Qingxiu, I will trap you, monkey. Is Qingxiu something that an ugly person like you can call? The whole martial arts arena was filled with curses. Unparalleled power gathered into a vortex, and wind blew everywhere. If looks could kill, Xia Feng would have been minced meat on the ground. Junior brother Feng, please watch your words. Han Qingxiu frowned and looked at Xia Feng coldly. Then, she turned and left. Boom! The moment she turned, the sound of attacks colliding, and Xiao Feng's scream came from behind. Master said to help him enter the secret realm, but he also said to teach him a lesson and not let him be too happy. After all, only by being oppressed could the chosen one grow faster. The faster he grew, the more luck he would have. Pigs would have more meat if they were fattened up. With Xiao Feng's stubbornness, it would be very difficult to expect him to find a setback for himself. Therefore, Xiao Feng, don't thank me. This is what I should do. Qing Qiu. Looking at the fairy-like figure walking on a mountain path, Xiao Feng crawled up from the ground and gritted his teeth. But just when everyone thought that he was going to fight back, then, under everyone's dumbstruck gaze, he fiercely slapped himself 3 times. Pa! 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 The entire martial arts practice field fell silent once again. Who could tell that this Feng Yi was actually a ruthless person? He even whipped himself when he was ruthless? However, at this time, the disciples of the Celestial Palace did not know that Xiao Feng really wanted to slap himself instead of flattering them. My mouth is really cheap. Xiao Feng, figure out who you are. Why do you have to call the fairy by her name? With your current appearance, your actions just now could be said to be blasphemous to the fairy. Feng Yi, do you think that slapping yourself can offset your rudeness just now? That's right. Feng Yi, if you dare to disrespect the fairy, I'll kill you. Pa! Pa! Senior brothers, is that enough? Another 2 slaps. Finally, under the gaze of the disciples of the Celestial Palace, Xiao Feng smiled apologetically, turned around, and walked down the mountain with his pig head. But at this time, at the end of the square, a red-clothed figure suddenly floated down. Mas, Master? Xiao Feng's eyes narrowed, instinctively feeling a little fearful. Cold Moon Celestial Palace, Taoist Yushao, a 6th-stage divine emperor expert, the same realm as the strongest person in the great Xia, Qiao Yunli. And this Yushao was much younger than Qiao Yunli. Her beautiful face was calm and indifferent, and she was peerlessly beautiful. Go, beat down those who humiliated you. Yu Zhao's voice was extremely cold, without a trace of emotion, but it instantly stunned Xiao Feng. Mas, Master, don't worry. Use your full strength. If you kill them, it's on me. Yu Xiao raised her head and looked at the disciples standing in front of the martial practice field. Her 6th-stage divine emperor's aura swept across the horizon, intimidating everyone on the spot, not daring to move in the slightest. Yu Xiao, the junior sister of the previous palace master, was now the youngest elder of the Cold Moon Celestial Palace. Even the current Cold Moon Celestial Palace master was somewhat respectful to her. But at this time, Xiao Feng was panicking. He had lived in seclusion for 20 years and had never done anything out of line. Although he had killed people in the dark, when had he done it so openly and brazenly in front of so many people? Furthermore, he was a new disciple, and he had just offended Han Qing Xiu. Those disciples had bullied and humiliated him. Truly, he deserved it. But Master actually wants me to beat them down and even kill them? F********. I don't want to be famous. It's easy to get slandered. Those trolls now are truly too frightening. With a single button in hand, the world is mine. They can scold the heavens, the earth, and the air. If they want to be ruthless, they can directly use an iron rod to scold themselves. I only want to live in seclusion, sneak into the immortal world, and secretly reap the fortune. It would be best if I have the opportunity to kill Ling Xiao and win Han Qing Qiu's favor. That way, I will be satisfied. But, Master, aren't you making things difficult for me? I have a master, but do they not have a master? If I were to provoke their master and make things difficult for me behind my back, wouldn't I be the one to suffer? How about I go up and fight with them, and then pretend that I can't beat them? If you don't defeat them today, I will expel you from the sect. Just as Xiao Feng was deep in thought, Yu Zhao's next sentence caused his heart to tremble. Yes, Master. Xiao Feng's eyes trembled. In the end, he did not dare to disobey Yu Zhao. He took a deep breath and began to walk toward the martial practice field. He was a secluded person, but he absolutely could not miss the opportunity to enter the secret realm. Yu Xiao heaved a sigh of relief when she saw the young man's expression gradually become resolute. Her little disciple was good in every way, but he was too self-abased. The Gung Metal Dao law should be indomitable. Only then could one achieve success in cultivation. How could such a weak and cowardly person reach the peak of the great Dao? To be honest, Yu Xiao understood him. According to Xiaofeng himself, he had no parents, and his face was cruelly disfigured by someone with a knife when he was young. Therefore, he must be lowly in his heart. He had suffered too much, which is why he lived so cautiously. But, you are now my disciple. With master around, no one in the western border can look down on you. Suddenly, a spirit wind whistled in the martial practice field. At the front, the three youths who had mocked Xia Feng suddenly emitted a dazzling spirit light. They were all famous prodigies of the Cold Moon Immortal Palace, and their master was also an elder. How could a mere disciple who had just entered the sect be a match for them? They did not dare to offend Yu Xiao, but the elders would definitely not interfere in a fight between peers. Therefore, they could use this opportunity to teach this arrogant Feng Yi a lesson. Qingqiu, you, I have thought about it for so long, but did not dare to do it. But you actually did it today. It would be disrespectful to junior sister Han if I don't slap your mouth. Chapter 473. Buzz. Xiaofeng walked step by step until he was in front of the three. There was no trace of weakness on his face, because he saw a beautiful white clothed figure standing proudly at the end of the mountain peak. Her hair and skirt fluttered in the mountain breeze, revealing her clear and moving face. She was as graceful as a fairy. Obviously, Han Qingqiu was also attracted by the commotion. Forget it. I have been hiding for so long. Today, let me be presumptuous, so that no one will find trouble with me in the future, so that I can continue living in Cold Moon Celestial Palace, so that Qingqiu can see that I, Xiaofeng, am not a good-for-nothing. Junior brother Feng, who do you want to fight first? Or do you want to slap yourself 2 more times to liven things up? Ha ha ha. The three geniuses of Cold Moon Celestial Palace laughed wildly, ignoring Xiaofeng's cold eyes. Bloom, my disciple, after today, there will be a place for you among the geniuses of West Border. Yu Xiao smiled and looked calmly at the young man, who finally stopped. Boom! In the next moment, a dazzling golden radiance started to shine around Xiaofeng. The void started to collapse. A Taoist sword seemed to pierce through the ancient times. The sound of Taoist sword reverberated in the sky. This is the Golden Age Dao Law, the realm of prosperity. This Xiaofeng, he is so powerful. I only need one sword to kill you. Xiaofeng sighed and waved his hand. The endless golden radiance pierced through the sky and reached the top of the three geniuses in an instant. The sea of sword chi surged and cut the void into pieces. At this moment, the three geniuses who were looking at Xiaofeng with disdain were stunned. There was even a hint of fear in their eyes. They could feel that if the Taoist sword was 1 foot lower, the three of them would be cut into pieces instantly. How could it be? How could this new disciple be so powerful? Suddenly, the three of them were filled with regret. However, finally, when a golden Taoist sword slashed down, Xiaofeng clenched his fist. The sword chi in the sky dissipated and turned into spiritual wind. In the end, he did not dare to hurt the three geniuses. Attitude was the most important thing. Otherwise, once his rationality was overshadowed by his impulsiveness, he would only end up falling early on. If one hadn't died once, they wouldn't have been able to comprehend this principle so thoroughly. Plop. On the other hand, the three young men that were extremely arrogant earlier had actually collapsed to the ground in unison with terrified expressions, and their bodies didn't have the slightest strength any longer. That moment just now was the closest they had ever been to death in their lives. Gulp. The world was so silent that one could hear a pin drop. All the disciples of Cold Moon Immortal Palace looked at the tall figure with his hands behind his back, their eyes filled with shock. Even Han Qingqiu, who was at the end of the mountain path, had a smile on her face. No wonder he was targeted by the young master. He had some skills. The young master had also instructed that Xiafeng had a weak personality and was very unscrupulous in his actions. Thus, he had to be provoked appropriately so that he would feel that he could do it. It was just that he didn't know how the young master planned to toy with him after he was cured. Play with? Inexplicably, Han Qingqiu's face turned red. She couldn't help but feel shy in her heart. However, it was this smile that could topple all living things, and that shyness that instantly caused Xia Feng's face to turn red with an indescribable sense of pride. Finally, she smiled. She smiled shyly. It turned out that pretending to be realistic could capture the heart of a proud woman. Suddenly, Xia Feng didn't seem to want to continue hiding. He wanted to stand upright in front of Han Qingqiu and shelter her from all the wind and rain. He wanted to tell her personally, "Qingqiu, look at this chaotic world. The mountains and rivers are turbulent. However, with me around, you only need to look beautiful. You don't need to hesitate. That's right. Show off your Tao and cultivate diligently. You will become the new pride of my immortal palace." Yu Zhao's voice came from afar. Xiafeng only nodded and smiled, his head held high. The sunlight shone down from above, making his figure seem even more tall and straight. At this moment, Xiafeng seemed to have obtained a new life. Shengzhou, central border. In a magnificent golden palace, a terrifying wave of heat suddenly surged out. Then, thunderclouds covered the sky, and spiritual energy trembled. The sound of the great Tao reverberated, revealing the might of the great Tao. After a long while, the door to the palace opened with a bang, and a beautiful figure in red walked out slowly. There was a faint smile on her pale face. "Congratulations on your breakthrough, Mississippi." Outside the hall, a maidservant immediately bowed down, and her beautiful eyes were filled with excitement. In the past, although Su Yan was considered a genius in the central border, he definitely couldn't be called a monster. But now, not only had Miss stepped into the divine general realm, she had comprehended the Tao and merged with a heaven and earth spirit fire. What kind of terrifying talent was this? Most importantly, the current Su Yan didn't have the slightest bit of cold qi on his body. His vitality was at its peak, and he could definitely live until he died. What about the matter I asked you to find out? Su Yan's expression was gentle, no longer as cold as before. His entire body seemed to be exuding a mature charm. "Miss, Lord Ling Xiao has indeed arrived at the western border. It is said that he led an army and destroyed an empire." A servant girl bowed and answered, "Destroyed an empire?" Su Yan's eyes narrowed, but the smile at the corner of his mouth became more obvious. "My man is so outstanding. He only went to the western border for a few days, and he already destroyed an empire? I'm afraid it will be soon. Soon, he will be able to establish an empire and take over me. Mother of the world? Should I find someone to make a phoenix robe and a golden crown for me?" But just as Su Yan was thinking to himself, a look of hesitation appeared on the servant girl's face. "But what? Say it." Su Yan's heart was uneasy, and the servant girl said in a panic, "But a few days ago, young master and the empress of the great Qin Empire, Qin Wushuang, went to the great Qin Empire together." Qin Wushuang? Su Yan frowned slightly. Her face instantly filled with coldness. Just by hearing this name, she felt that this Qin Wushuang was not a good person. Empress of the empire? How dare you steal my man? I will make you lose your empire and your life. And can you finish your sentence in one go? Su Yan was already anxious, but when she saw the hesitation on the servant girl's face, she instantly exploded. "Miss, that Qin Wushuang is known as the Demon Empress, and young master is with her. Go to the treasury to get 1,000,000,000 spirit stones, 1,000 divine weapons, and prepare a jade palace. I want to personally go to the western border to see the empress." Su Yan snorted coldly and was about to leave. "Yenner, where are you going?" But before she could take a step, a cold shout came from the void above her head. Immediately, Su Wenye's figure descended from the sky and blocked in front of her. "Father!" Su Yan's pretty face froze, and her expression was somewhat resentful. I want to go to the western border. You're not allowed to go anywhere. Stay in the clan and cultivate obediently. Suya snorted coldly and glared fiercely at the two servant girls. Look after Mississippi. If she sneaks out, I will hold both of you responsible. Father, didn't you say that you will no longer care about me and Ling Xiao? Hearing this, a trace of anger surged in Su Yan's eyes, and a faint flame spread around her body. I won't care about you, but the premise is that that brat can cultivate to the Emperor realm alive. Su Wenye took a deep look at Su Yan, then turned and disappeared. Currently, the western border was in turmoil, and demons were everywhere. Although all of this had nothing to do with Ling Xiao, but his talent was too terrifying, and he was probably already in the eyes of some people. Although Su Wenye was disloyal with his scheming, how could he put himself in the teeth of the storm? Su Yan already had the spiritual fire, and her life was not in danger. At this time, if she was too close to Ling Xiao, it would obviously bring disaster to the Yunlai Merchant Union. She had the appearance of a formidable hero and invincible immortal, but she had to survive to change the situation in the Xingzhou. The current Ling Xiao was still too weak. Chapter 474. Father. Su Yan gritted her teeth. She could faintly feel that there was an aura locked onto her. It's fine if you don't want me to go out. Bai Luo, go and prepare the spirit stones and spiritual treasures I told you about, and send them to young master. Yes, young mistress. Young master, even if Yen is not by your side, I will support you silently. Su Yan's eyes flashed with determination. In her mind, a handsome figure in white gradually appeared. She missed him a lot. She missed his smile, his gentleness, his white robe, and the smell on his body. Great Qin, Blood Dragon Hall. Ling Xiao sat cross-legged with his eyes closed. There seemed to be Dao laws surrounding his body. Above his head, two Dao shadows appeared. It was indescribably mystical. Is Ling Xiao here? Suddenly, a cold voice came from outside the hall. Ling Xiao opened his eyes, and a smile appeared on his face. Wushuang, you are here. Qin Wushuang's beautiful figure appeared in the hall. Her beautiful eyes looked at the empty hall in front of her with surprise. Originally, with her status, she was not allowed to enter this hall. However, what made Qin Wushuang puzzled was that the Blood Dragon Hall was empty today. She did not even see a guard. How is Qin Wupa? Wupa, he is fine. I have thought it through. Since the marriage was set by the ancestors, I am willing to marry you. Qin Wushuang's voice was still indifferent. However, at this moment, Ling Xiao looked at her meaningfully. This woman, why did she suddenly change her mind? It was obvious that this was a conspiracy. However, with Qin Wupa's methods, he could only control the soul slaves and secretly attack Qin Wushuang. Or he could deliberately make Qin Wushuang suspect that he had ulterior motives. Ling Xiao had played these tricks so many times. How could he fall into his trap? Ha! Wushuang, I have heard about your matter. Also, I suspect that the person who destroyed the Jinan mansion and the person who killed the great Qin imperial family should be the same person. Ling Xiao smiled indifferently. His expression was calm. He did not reveal a complacent expression like Qin Wushuang had imagined. How could it be? Could it be that he was really not after the throne? What do you mean? Those who killed the rebels of the Emperor clan have long been executed by General Xiao on the spot. You mean, Wushuang, you think of things too simply. Back then, the chaos at the South Guarding Mansion could be considered the beginning of the turmoil in the Great Qin. If those traitors were so easy to kill, why would they need to plan this rebellion? Ling Xiao shook his head, but his expression gradually became serious. But now that the imperial court is stable and the nation is peaceful, if there is really someone hiding behind the scenes, what exactly is he planning? In fact, to tell the truth, Qin Wushuang did not really believe that Ling Xiao was the person who had killed his father. After all, the Jinan Manor was destroyed 10 years ago. At that time, how old was Ling Xiao? How could he possibly be his father's opponent? However, just like what Qin Wupa had said, there might be a shady power supporting him from the shadows. Thus, Qin Wushuang had come. She wanted to know if Qin Wushuang's guess was true. She had been searching for her father's murderer for many years, but she had never found a single clue. And Ling Zhao's appearance was too much of a coincidence. His methods could be said to be strange and cruel. Wupa's suspicion was not without reason. Was he scheming? Of course, he is scheming for power. Wushuang, in this world, some people look like humans, but they are not. Usually, the most dangerous place is the safest place. The more he pretends to be weak and pitiful, the more likely he is hiding a shocking secret. Ling Xiao gave a cold sneer, and Qin Wushuang's eyes suddenly widened. The most dangerous place is the safest place? The more he pretends to be weak, the more secrets he is hiding? Suddenly, Qin Wushuang felt that Ling Xiao was referring to Qin Wupa. However, there was no evidence. How is it possible? I have watched my younger brother grow up since he was young, even though his foresight is very accurate, and he even imparted an evil cultivation technique to her. But he did all this for me. Besides, how could he kill his father? Indeed, this Ling Xiao had ulterior motives. In just one day, he could no longer hold himself back and wanted to sow discord between us. Looking at Qin Wushuang, who had fallen into deep thought, Ling Zhao's mouth instantly raised into an evil grin. There was a trace of ghost qi on this woman's body. Obviously, this trace of qi did not belong to her. For sure, it must be related to Qin Wupa. He did not expect a demonic brother to believe him so easily. However, after today, a thorn would be planted in Qin Wushuang's heart. In the future, if Qin Wupa did anything abnormal, Qin Wushuang would certainly become suspicious. What? Qin Wupa did not do anything abnormal? No matter, if he didn't, I will help him. Don't ask, just ask. I, Ling Xiao, am a righteous person. I'm not doing this to woo this great Qin Empress. I only want her to recognize the reality and avenge her father. The destruction of the Zhenan mansion was indeed strange. When a Zhenan king died, even his divine soul was sucked dry. For such a method, in the entire Shang state, only Qin Wupa, a member of the Ghost Clan, would be proficient in it. Since it was not him, it could only be Qin Wupa. Regarding this, Ling Xiao had some guesses. Regardless of how Qin Wupa's soul crossed the Shang state, clearly he was not a human. Therefore, in his eyes, blood ties were not worth mentioning. In Xia Chen's memory, the Ghost Clan had always viewed the human clan as their greatest enemy. From his point of view, killing the South Vanquishing King wasn't considered as a lunatic. Most likely, it was to increase his strength. After all, to the Ghost Clan, the divine soul of living beings was the best nourishment. It was the same principle as how the human clan hunted the demon clan and used their essence blood and demon cores to cultivate. A member of the Ghost Clan could not cultivate openly in the human domain. This was most likely the reason why he pretended to be a pig. Without any precaution, he acted rashly and cultivated in secret. One must admit that Qin Wupa's methods and temperament were both terrifying. After 30 years of forbearance, he had silently cultivated to the 5th stage of the Divine King realm. Even in the entire Shang state, he could be considered a monster. Moreover, he had very limited cultivation resources. If he did not have any misgivings, he would have become a great emperor long ago. He was smart and cruel behind the scenes, but he could not see the light of day. I, Ling Xiao, the light of righteousness, am ready to shine on him. Then, who do you think is the most suspicious in the Qin palace? Qin Wushuang snorted coldly in his heart, but there was a trace of doubt on his face. Hearing this, Ling Xiao only shook his head and smiled. After all, I have just arrived at the Qin palace. How would I know who is the most suspicious? However, the tragic death of the palace made today proves that there is a demon in the Qin palace. Of course, although I do not know who is the most suspicious, Wushuang, you can trust me completely. Suddenly, deep affection appeared in Ling Zhao's eyes. Then, he reached out and held Qin Wushuang's jade-like hand. He said with a gentle tone, "If I want the Qin dynasty, you know that I will conquer it directly. Who can stop me in the western border?" Chapter 475. You. Qin Wushuang's face was filled with panic. She hurriedly pulled her hand out of Ling Zhao's palm. However, at this moment, she was somewhat confused. Qin Wupa did not know about Ling Zhao's background, but she knew about it. If Ning Tian's million-man army, Xiao Beifa's blood dragon guards, and Xiao Yunli attacked the great Qin Empire, it would be difficult for her to fight against them. Behind her stood two god emperors. One was at the 5th stage, and the other was at the 6th stage. However, the great Zhou ancestor was already at the peak of the 7th stage. Wasn't he killed by the young man before her? Inexplicably, Qin Wushuang felt, could it be that she and her brother had wronged him? Ling Xiao, there is no one else here. Tell me, what do you want? Finally, Qin Wushuang took a deep breath and asked the biggest question in her heart. Since she could not guess, she might as well be direct. What did he want? The empire? The great Zhou Empire was already in his pocket, but he did not care about it. Could it be, he really thump? Qin Wushuang could feel that his heart had jumped twice violently. Ling Xiao only raised his head and looked at the sky. Actually, I have wronged you, Qin Wushuang's face turned cold. Wrong me? Could it be, he is really related to the enemy who killed my father? I should have given you a lifetime of prosperity and supreme glory, but even your family couldn't protect you. I should have given you stability and a phoenix crown, but it disappeared for 3 whole years when you were at your saddest and in despair. I know that your strength is just a disguise. This chaotic world is dangerous, and you are a weak woman. You must be very tired. Ling Xiao sighed. He raised his hand and gently touched Qin Wushuang's face. Wushuang, I am back. To me, the imperial capital is like a fleeting cloud. My path is the path to heaven. The western border cannot trap me, nor can Xingzhou. What I seek is the peak of the great Tao, not the ruler of a dynasty. However, since you like it, I will work hard to conquer the entire western border. Consider it a betrothal gift for you. Boom! Suddenly, spiritual light shot out from Qin Wushuang's body. Her eyes were already filled with tears. The air suddenly quieted down. Memories surged like a tidal wave. Currently, Qin Wushuang did not fall in love with Ling Xiao because of a few words. Only, the warmth in his eyes greatly resembled that father who had used his life to protect her and loved her dearly. For a full 10 years, Qin Wushuang's world-weariness was the despair of his father's death and the self-blame for his inability to find the true murderer. His heart, which was originally as cold as ice, quietly cracked open a crack. That's right. I've seen you slay a great emperor with your saber, and I've also seen you stand calmly before an army of 1,000,000. I used to think that you had everything, but in the end, it was just my own short-sightedness. The war god bowed his head, the imperial advisor bowed his head, and the vicious general recognized him as his master. How could his world be a mere mountain and river? How could his path stop at the throne? At this moment, Qin Wushuang suddenly understood. Wu Po's guess was reasonable, but in the end, the siblings had underestimated the youth in front of them. The pinnacle of the great Tao, the western frontier as the betrothal gift. How domineering. He was only 17 years old. Wushuang, what's wrong? Ling Xiao frowned slightly and looked at the shock, dullness, and sadness on Qin Wushuang's face with heartache. No, nothing. If there's nothing else, I will take my leave. Inexplicably, the great emperor aura from Qin Wushuang's body had disappeared without a trace. Before such a young man with such great ambition who wanted to conquer the world, all of her domineering power appeared pale and powerless. Even now, it was difficult for Qin Wushuang to have any doubts about Ling Xiao. In the end, they were two different people. Her vision was as shallow as an ant's. I will help you find the person who killed your father. I will make up for what I owe you for these 3 years. Wushuang, with me here, you will no longer be alone. Ling Xiao smiled gently. That clear and handsome face seemed to contain immortal intentions. Putting aside his own reasons, Qin Wushuang felt that this young man was most likely the most persistent dream in all women's hearts. Unfortunately, I am not worthy. From a moment Qin Wushuang passed that technique to her, she knew that her ending would not be a good one. Only, the satisfaction from the rapid growth of her strength had made her unable to care about her evil reputation. As long as she became stronger, as long as she could protect Wushuang's life, control the great Qin, and find the real murderer, even if one day she was spurned by the world, she would have no regrets. That technique, suddenly, a trace of coldness emerged from the bottom of Qin Wushuang's heart. Initially, she had never doubted Qin Wushuang. However, after hearing Ling Zhao's words today, she was slightly shaken. After all, that method of using corpses as a medium to control souls was too strange. Wupa, where did he get it from? Thank you, young master. Qin Wushuang walked out of the Blood Dragon Saint Palace with a confused expression and looked towards the direction of the Imperial Palace. At this moment, she seemed to hesitate. She wanted to ask Qin Wushuang face to face whether he was hiding any secrets. However, she was also afraid of knowing the result. The two had relied on each other since young. His mother had died early, causing Qin Wushuang to rely on her even more. Although they were siblings, in Qin Wushuang's eyes, her brother was more like her child. No way. What secrets could Wushuang have? He had always grown up in front of her. How could he hide any secrets from her? In the end, Qin Wushuang sighed and walked towards the Imperial Palace. However, just as her figure appeared in front of the palace, she saw Qin Wushuang sitting on the wooden carriage from afar. He was looking at her with a gloomy expression. Where did you go? Wushuang, why did you come out again? Qin Wushuang forced a smile and took the initiative to push Qin Wushuang towards the palace. I went outside the palace to take care of some matters. You want to see Ling Xiao? Qin Wushuang's voice was filled with coldness. His pale face faintly revealed killing intent. Yes, Wushuang. Actually, you might have misunderstood Ling Xiao. Young master, he could not be the person who killed father. Qin Wushuang sighed inwardly. She truly did not know how to explain to Qin Wushuang. Tell him that this person had killed a divine emperor and had extraordinary methods? Wouldn't that be more in line with Qin Wushuang's guess? Evil demons were cold-blooded, heartless, and scheming. However, his tyrannical straightforwardness did not seem to be an act. Impossible. You have only seen him a few times, and you are already sure that he is not father's murderer. Qin Wushuang suddenly stood up. His legs were nimble, and he no longer had his usual sickly and frail appearance. For a moment, Qin Wushuang was somewhat stunned. Inwardly, she remembered what Ling Xiao had said. Usually, the more fragile a person pretended to be, the more secrets they would hide. Wushuang, you sister, he is an evil demon. Be careful of falling into his trap. I have a premonition that he will soon give himself away. Qin Wushuang took a deep breath. There seemed to be a soul light flickering in her eyes. It seemed that it was time to put the plan on the agenda. Or else, this Qin Wushuang would most likely be taken down by Ling Xiao. Women, were indeed short-sighted. Chapter 476. Wupa, I have something I want to ask you. Qin Wushuang raised his head and looked at the young man before him with a serious expression. That evil technique, where did you get it? Didn't I tell you before? I picked up this technique by accident when I went out. Qin Wushuang's eyes were gloomy and his tone was somewhat low. He could not understand why his sister's attitude had changed so drastically after meeting with Ling Xiao. What kind of drug did that Ling Xiao give her? Now, this Qin Wushuang was obviously on guard against him. It would be risky if he wanted to plant a soul seal on her, especially since the technique she practiced was an ultimate technique of the Ghost Clan. Her insight into the power of the divine soul was incomparable to ordinary humans. What was this called? Lifting a rock and smashing it on your own feet. Damn. Most importantly, Qin Wushuang had never expected that Ling Xiao had turned Qin Wushuang's cold and domineering temperament. Suddenly, Qin Wushuang felt that he had met his match. Initially, in his eyes, the people of the lower worlds were not worth mentioning. Even those so-called proud sons of heaven could not be compared to him. But from the looks of it now, this Ling Xiao was probably not that simple. I picked it up by accident. You mean you got your technique by picking it up? Qin Wushuang gave a light sigh. Who do you think you're to pick up such a powerful and evil technique? How come others cannot pick it up? Only you could. According to your words, everyone should stop looking for the fortune of the secret territories and go for a stroll. Perhaps they could pick up a treasure from the heavens? Sister, what did Ling Xiao say to you? Qin Wushuang's eyes became even more gloomy. For the first time in his life, he saw doubt in Qin Wushuang's eyes. Nothing. I will send you back to the palace. Qin Wushuang pushed the wooden carriage, and a trace of extreme coldness appeared on her face. Today, Qin Wushuang's words and actions made people feel something was wrong. Could it be he was hiding some shocking secret? Qin Wushuang turned around and walked out of the palace when the two had walked into the palace. However, when she reached the entrance of the hall, she suddenly stopped. Soulless, you won't lie to me, right? Sis, what are you talking about? Why would I lie to you? Qin Wupa laughed bitterly, but the soul light in his eyes suddenly became dazzling. Damned Ling Xiao, tonight, I will consign you to eternal damnation. Trying to steal my woman? Was Ningcheng worthy? When I roamed the heavens and earth, the prides of the myriad races fought to kneel at my feet. All the geniuses of the world wanted nothing more than to offer their souls to be my slaves. If not for that bastard plotting against me in the end, I would be the ghost lord of a realm. I was a mere ant from the lower realms. Since you're blocking my path, then you should be prepared to become a stepping stone. Night fell. A palace attendant suddenly appeared in front of Blood Dragon Hall, where Ling Xiao was. Dragon Lord, young Master Wu Pe, is holding a banquet in the palace. He said that he wants to treat you specially for saving his life today. Hearing this, the corner of Ling Xiao's lips curled up, but his eyes flashed with evil. It's here. Looks like our child of destiny behind the scenes can't help but make a move on him. Usually, evildoers with this kind of character would not directly confront others. No matter what the difference was, their character was evil, ruthless, and in control of the situation. This was somewhat similar to Ling Xiao. However, it was obvious that Qin Wupa's rank could not be compared to Ling Xiao's. He might be able to toy with the prides of the Shengzhou as he pleased. Even in the upper realms, he was a famous existence. But he would never be able to toy with a rider who transmigrated. This is a Hongmen banquet for me. Ling Xiao nodded with a smile, but the attendant was slightly stunned. Dragon Lord, the banquet will be held at young Master Wu Po's quiet hall, not at the Red Door. Oh, you may leave. Tell young Master Wu Po that I will be there on time. Ling Xiao waved his hand and dismissed the attendant. Beside him, a sinister look flashed across Xiao Beifa's face. My lord, I'm afraid Qin Wupa has other intentions. Based on his understanding of the emperor's younger brother, today's banquet would not be as simple as just thanking him. Although Qin Wupa rarely left the palace, the evil aura on his body made Xiao Beifa quite annoyed. Of course it won't be that simple. This young Master Wu Per is most likely inviting me to die. Ling Xiao smiled indifferently, and a murderous aura instantly rose from Xiao Beifa's body. My lord, please allow me to enter the palace and kill this person. No need. You don't have to interfere in this matter to avoid gossip. Since Qin Wupa wants to play, I'll play with him. A sinister look flashed across Ling Xiao's eyes, but he could roughly guess what Qin Wupa wanted to do tonight. It was nothing more than killing him by force and holding the pot. What else could it be? Could it be that you expect a Ghost Clan evildoer to voluntarily submit and call me father? Of course it's impossible. However, we can beat him until he shouts. Also, from the moment Ling Xiao saw Qin Wupa, he had some vague guesses. A person of the Ghost Clan would not appear in this barren land of the Shang state for no reason. For him to appear here, there must be some cause and effect. Plus, Qin Wupa's luck was terrifying. He most likely came to the western border with great fortune and opportunity. Thinking about it this way, could it be related to Xia Chun or the soul-sucking ghost pearl? This treasure was the most precious treasure of the Ghost Clan. Its grade had already surpassed the setting of this world. To any ghost martial artist, This treasure was not only a great fortune, but also a great threat. The soul-sucking ghost pearl could also suck the original soul. Only, he did not know if this Qin Wupa was the evildoer of the ghost clan that was killed by Xiachun. If he was, then this game would be much more interesting. As the saying goes, if I don't enter hell, who will? However, even if I, Ling Xiao, am in hell, I will still be the ancestor of all ghosts. But, Master, that Qin Wushuang has always been protective of his people, and he has a strong and overbearing personality. Once you get into a conflict with Qin Wupa, I am afraid Xiao Beifa seemed to be somewhat worried. He stared at Ling Xiao with his scarlet eyes and said, "It's okay. Even if there is a conflict, I believe Wushuang will stand in front of me." Ling Xiao shook his head and walked out of the palace. If Qin Wushuang had not returned to the palace and said something, most likely Qin Wupa would not be in such a hurry to deal with him. Therefore, the current Qin Wushuang probably did not trust him as much as before. A fifth-grade divine king was still all right, and the identity of a sole martial artist of the Ghost Clan was naturally more threatening to ordinary martial artists. But to Ling Xiao, do you think my ancient Panga stone is just a decoration? My divine soul has already reached the Emperor realm. Are you surprised? Don't worry. Not only can my divine soul crush you, I also have the most precious treasure of your Ghost Clan. Are you surprised? When you show your fangs and reveal your identity. Qin Wushuang? Little brother, so you are the evil devil. I have obtained both women and the imperial court, but you have failed miserably. You want to play tricks with me? Wupa, remember your identity. You're just a little brother. I, Ling Xiao, am your brother-in-law. Chapter 477. Great Qin Imperial Palace, Great Peace Palace. Qin Wupa looked at the personal servant before him with a calm expression and waved his hand lightly. You may leave. Yes, young master. Only when the personal servant had walked far away, a trace of gloominess flashed across his eyes. Currently, there were still 4 armored guards standing inside the palace. All of them were at the divine general stage. Only, their expressions appeared extremely wooden and even empty. Clearly, Qin Wupa had already absorbed their divine souls, and they were completely puppets. Ling Xiao must not die in his palace. It was because if he did, the Blood Dragon Palace would certainly rebel. Xiao Beifa's prestige in the army was truly frightening. Therefore, even if he wanted to trample this ant to death, he must have a proper reason. I invited you to my palace for a banquet out of kindness, yet you exposed your identity as a devil and killed my guards. You even took away their divine souls. Devil. Of course, such a method lacked a degree of credibility. After all, it was Qin Wupa who invited Ling Xiao. Why would he suddenly transform into a devil? Therefore, to make the world believe, to make Qin Wushuang believe in this scheme, he was the most important bargaining chip. By that time, he only needed to die and have his divine soul taken away. Then, this pot would be firmly held. After all, with Qin Wupa dead, who would suspect that he deliberately framed Ling Xiao? As for why the latter had suddenly transformed into a devil, who would care? In the end, all of his excuses would only be sophistry. This scheme could be said to be perfect. By that time, for sure Qin Wushuang would be enraged and kill Ling Xiao. It would be reasonable and reasonable. Everyone had the right to kill a devil. Even Xiao Beifa and the Blood Dragon Palace would not dare to protect a devil that ate people, right? Even if they betrayed, there would be the holy sect to suppress them. Colluding with a devil and bringing disaster to the world, they should be killed. It was rumored that the divine emissary of the holy sect was at the western border. If he heard of this matter, he would certainly come to investigate. Since Qin Wupa was dead and his divine soul had disappeared, even a 9th-stage divine emperor would not be able to see any clues. Then, there was only one answer. Ling Xiao was indeed a demon. Although this method was cumbersome and laborious, it was absolutely foolproof. Moreover, it could shift the blame of the Jinan Wang Mansion's extermination onto Ling Xiao and his henchmen. Why not? Wonderful. I, Qin Wupa, am indeed worthy of standing on the second floor. What holy religion? What Ling Xiao? You are all just lowly ants with short-sightedness. Whatever I want you to see, you can only obediently see it. As for me, I only need to change my physical body, change my identity, and this world will still be mine. Reporting to young master, Dragon Lord Ling Xiao has arrived. Suddenly, the voice of an attendant came from outside the palace. Qin Wupa's mouth immediately curled into a smile. Hugging the black cat beast, he walked towards the outside of the palace. He, Dragon Lord, Prince Soulless. Ling Xiao smiled indifferently. His handsome face seemed to be filled with immortal splendor. Within 3 feet of his body, spiritual energy surged uncontrollably, forming countless divine shadows above his head. Not knowing why, Qin Wupa had an illusion that the Ling Xiao he saw now was somewhat different from before. However, with his attainments and soul, he only needed to take a glance to see that this person was indeed Ling Xiao. Could it be that I am overthinking? In the end, Qin Wupa shook his head and led Ling Xiao to his seat. Then, he ordered the maidservants to serve the wine and dishes. Ling Xiao also had a calm look. His face was always smiling, as if he did not hold a grudge against Qin Wupa because of the previous unpleasantness between the two of them. Dragon Lord, I have always been very curious. Where have you been in these 3 years? Qin Wupa filled Ling Xiao's cup with wine. His pale face carried a trace of doubt. In his arms, the black cat beast was quietly nestled. Although there was no demonic aura on its body, its pair of dark blue eyes were somewhat strange. I went to the Great Xia. Ling Xiao's voice was neither sad nor happy. He lowered his head and took a sip of wine. The two of them chatted idly. At this moment, the maidservants in the Hall of Quiet Peace had all been sent away by Qin Wupa. Only 4 armored guards were left. He, Dragon Lord, please drink first. I suddenly remembered something. Wupa will be back soon. Qin Wupa stood up and suddenly smiled apologetically at Ling Xiao. Carrying the black cat, he walked out of the hall. From the beginning to the end, Ling Xiao did not even look at him. However, the corner of his mouth faintly raised. As expected, a child of destiny behind the scenes would not easily reveal his identity unless it was absolutely necessary. Tonight, the Great Qin Imperial Palace would probably be very lively. However, a mere 5th-grade divine king, a divine king with a weak physical body who only cultivated his divine spirit. Ling Xiao did not take him seriously from the beginning to the end. All schemes and tricks were meaningless in the face of absolute strength. What's more, I've long since grown tired of your tricks. What do you have to fight with me? There was no right or wrong in the path of cultivation. Everyone was just fighting for luck and fortune. In a ruin, 2 people were fighting. Whoever won would be righteous. The so-called heavenly fate was just being protected by the heavenly Tao, who said that he had to be honest and kind. If one was selfless, no one would be able to walk to the end of this path. Therefore, those supreme experts who stood at the peak of the world were probably not as benevolent and kind as they were now when they were weak. When Ling Xiao finished the last drop of wine in the cup and placed the cup on the table, a bright smile suddenly bloomed on his face. At this moment, the entire Jingan Hall was suddenly filled with a majestic spiritual aura, isolating this place from the outside world. The 4 armored guards also drew their sabers and surrounded Ling Xiao. However, these 4 people were all divine generals. It was obvious that Qin Wupa's goal was not to kill him. Thinking about it, if something really happened to him in Jingan Hall, not only would Qin Wupa suffer, but Qin Wuxuang would also be implicated. This was definitely not the original intention of the main character behind the scenes. They believed in a perfect plan to play the world in the palm of their hands. Originally, all the good and evil in this world were decided by them. However, you cannot see it. I'm sitting right here. Do you dare to kill me? Ling Xiao picked up a wine pot and refilled his cup. At this moment, he could clearly feel that there was no fluctuation of divine spirit from the 4 people in front of him. In other words, they were not controlled by a spiritual seal at all. Instead, their divine spirits were directly extracted. At this moment, They were still alive only because there was a wisp of Qin Wupa's divine spirit in their soul seas. There were 4 cameras, and 4 cameras that could be cut off at any time. Up to this point, Ling Xiao had already guessed what Qin Wupa wanted to do. In the entire Jingan Hall, there was only him and these 4 guards. They were dead, and their divine spirits were extracted. Who was the main culprit? Of course, it was Ling Xiao. Interesting. This son of destiny had some brains and was different from those in the past. No wonder he was the main character behind the scenes. Chapter 478. Good wine. Ling Xiao took a sip of the wine. He still had no intention of making a move. He could kill the 4 divine generals with a wave of his hand. However, even if he didn't make a move, Qin Wupa wouldn't be able to hurt him. Otherwise, wouldn't his plan be for naught? In the rear hall of the Qin Palace, in front of Qin Wushuang's bedroom, Qin Wupa hugged the black cat and frowned slightly. Why hasn't Ling Xiao made a move yet? His original intention was to cause a commotion in the Jingan Palace and cause a commotion. Then, it would be time for him to perform. However, at this moment, that bastard didn't have any intention of making a move. Inexplicably, Qin Wupa felt a trace of uneasiness. Could it be that Ling Xiao saw through his intentions? So what if you saw through it? If you don't make a move, I'll do it myself. Boom! Suddenly, a loud sound came from the Jingan Palace. The 4 guards who were originally approaching Ling Xiao suddenly attacked each other in pairs. Spiritual light shot up into the sky and almost overturned the main hall. Instantly, the entire Qin Palace was filled with countless powerful auras. One figure after another stepped out of the palace and headed toward Jing and Hall at high speed. At this moment, Ling Xiao just looked at the 4 guards who had died miserably on the ground. The corner of his mouth curled up into a sinister smile. Then, his figure suddenly disappeared from the main hall. Ling Xiao, let's see how you explain yourself this time. Looking at the spiritual light that cut through the sky, Qin Wupa's mouth curled up and his eyes flickered. And the soul world that was originally shrouding Jingan Palace disappeared in an instant. After all, with Ling Xiao's strength, it was impossible for him to break through his soul world. Moreover, many god emperors of the Great Qin Empire had noticed the commotion here. It was too late for him to run. Such a perfect plan, just thinking about it, made people feel proud. Without any effort, he used only 4 puppets to eliminate the biggest threat. As for the spiritual fire on his body, there were probably no more than 3 people in the Great Qin Empire who knew this secret. Right now, Ling Xiao was in the Qin Palace. Even if he died, his corpse would definitely be closely guarded. As for Qin Wupa, he only needed to hide beside Qin Wushuang, and he would always find a chance to approach Ling Xiao. Everything was flawless and flawless. Even if the Holy Church's divine master came personally, there was only one evil demon in the Great Qin Imperial Palace, and that was Ling Xiao. I said it. Qin Wupa, Ghost Clan little smarty. Next, it's time for the fatal blow. Qin Wupa sneered. Suddenly, his figure swept out and dashed towards Qin Wushuang's bedroom. At the same time, his voice boomed, filled with fear and helplessness. Ling Xiao, my sister won't let you off. His figure was directly sent flying, crashing through the palace doors. Just as he was in midair, his soul left his body and entered the body of the cat beast in his arms. A faint blue light flashed through the cat's eyes, and a hint of human coldness flashed through the corner of its mouth. The timing was reasonable, and the expression was on point. Perfect. Qin Wupa sneered inwardly. Now, this plan was completely over. The 4 great imperial guards died tragically. Their souls were taken, and many god emperors surrounded Ling Xiao. He was born with a weak body, and under the protection of the imperial guards, he ran here. However, he was still hit by Ling Xiao's evil technique, and his body died and his soul scattered. This black cat beast was his favorite when he was alive. His sister would definitely cherish it and keep it by her side, thinking of him whenever she saw it. This way, spiritual fire and whatnot could be taken away at any time. Everything was connected, and it was a precise deployment. Wupa, Qin Wushuang's pretty face was stunned, and then it suddenly turned pale. He took a step forward and landed beside Qin Wupa. Seeing this scene, Qin Wupa's mouth instantly curved into a smile. He exerted force with his forepaws and threw himself into Qin Wushuang's arms. However, just as he was about to pretend to be pitiful with a look of enjoyment, his eyes hardened. At this moment, above the palace, a white-robed figure was looking at him with a faint smile. That's right, he was not looking at the corpse on the ground, but at the black cat he took over. Ling Xiao, how is this possible? At this moment, Qin Wupa was suddenly confused. There was even a moment when he suspected that this Ling Xiao had a twin brother. Or else, how could the aura of these two people be exactly the same? Beep, the destined child's heart trembled. Congratulations to the host for plundering 500 luck points. Villain points, 5,000 points. What did I say? Ling Xiao shook his head with a smile and walked to Qin Wushuang's side. The show is about to start. Ling Xiao, quick, say my brother. Qin Wushuang looked helplessly at Ling Xiao. Her beautiful eyes were filled with pleading. Just a moment ago, Ling Xiao suddenly visited and discussed some matters of the great Qin kingdom with her. Originally, Qin Wushuang was against it. After all, she was the ruler of a dynasty. Now it was already midnight. This dragon lord had not left the palace for a long time, so it would definitely attract gossip. Regarding this, Ling Xiao did not care and said that there would be a wonderful show tonight in the Qin palace. However, Qin Wushuang never dreamed that the good show that Ling Xiao was talking about was the death of her brother, Wupa. Wait, what did Wushu mean by shouting that sentence just now? What, Ling Xiao, my sister will not let you go. Wupa meant that he was killed by Ling Xiao. But how was that possible? Tonight, Ling Xiao had been in her palace and did not leave at all. Could it be that an evil demon had transformed into his appearance and attacked Wupa? He's completely dead. Even his soul was taken away. Hiss, what a vicious method. Ling Xiao shook his head and sighed. However, he did not hide the smile on his face. The one who won a Jing in palace was naturally his purple qi stainless Dao body. Previously, Ling Xiao did not know what method Qin Wupa would use to deal with him. However, he was a villain. Of course, he had to be very careful. Regardless of whether he was going to use force or pin the blame on him, Ling Xiao was fully prepared. If he used force, the three great god emperors would be on standby. Ling Xiao could also enter and hide at any time. Even if this ghost clan demon's methods were terrifying and Ling Xiao was no match for him, it would only be his divine body that died. It would not affect his main body at all. As for framing him, haha, in the entire Qin palace, only Qin Wushuang could be framed by Qin Wupa. So Wushuang, tonight's moon is good. Looking at the moon, I miss you. What? Wupa. Hearing this, Qin Wushuang's delicate body trembled and she almost fell to the ground. However, Ling Xiao held her in his arms. Seeing this scene, the black cat beast that was sandwiched between the two of them had a trace of extreme hatred in its eyes. Damn it, what was going on? Why were there two Ling Xiaos with the same aura in this world? With Qin Wupa's experience, he naturally knew that there were some techniques in this world that could be cultivated to the extreme and create many clones. However, such techniques were classics, even in the upper realm. How could a mere ant from the lower realm control it? Chapter 479. Don't worry. The most important thing now is to find Wupa's murderer. I think this must be related to the massacre of the South Garden King's mansion. Ling Xiao patted Qin Wushuang's shoulder lightly and comforted her in a low voice. Seeing the intimate interaction between the two, Qin Wupa could no longer hide the killing intent in his cat eyes. However, once his identity was exposed, not only would he lose Qin Wushuang, he would also be surrounded and killed by the experts of the Qin Palace. What can I do? I also want to King kill this bastard who comforted my sister. However, didn't my plan fail? Even now, Qin Wupa still didn't know why he failed. However, this feeling made him terrified. For the first time, he miscalculated. Is it related to father's death? Qin Wushuang's eyes flashed with tears. Previously, she had some doubts about Qin Wupa. However, now that she saw him die, Qin Wushuang suddenly felt that life didn't have much meaning anymore. If it weren't for the hatred in her heart, Qin Wushuang would have died with her brother. I know you are sad, Wushuang. I know that no matter how I comfort you, it will be difficult to heal the scar in your heart. However, believe me, I will find the murderer who killed your father and brother. Ling Xiao sighed. His eyes seemed to be filled with sadness. He hugged Qin Wushuang even more tightly. If it weren't for the fact that he had enough confidence in his divine soul possession technique, Qin Wupa would have suspected that he was deliberately trying to kill him. Wushuang, no matter what happens, I will stand behind you. Don't cry. You are the ruler of the great Qin and the future empress of the western border. You still have people to protect. Let us work together to find this evil demon who is causing havoc in the world. For the world, we will kill this demon. Ling Zhao's voice was impassioned. His body seemed to be filled with celestial light. Qin Wushuang's state of mind was already in chaos. She was no longer as cold and domineering as before. After hearing such touching words, a trace of exhaustion appeared on her beautiful face. Fortunately, I met you. Yes. Qin Wushuang's voice was very soft. Then, as if she was discouraged, she leaned her face on Ling Zhao's shoulder and could no longer suppress the tears in her eyes. Ling Xiao, I beg you, you must help me find the demon that killed my father and brother. As long as you can find the real culprit, I'm willing to give myself to you to repay your kindness. Wushuang, what are you talking about? Do you think that I, Ling Xiao, am the kind of person who would take advantage of others when they are weak? Are you looking down on me? I help you take revenge because I don't want you to be depressed. As for the marriage, let's talk about it later. Ling Xiao spoke with a righteous tone that even contained anger. On the contrary, it made the tears in Qin Wushuang's beautiful eyes surge violently. Damn! Shameless. I, Qin Wupa, have lived for hundreds of years and have never seen such a shameless person. If you are not after Qin Wushuang's beauty, why are you hugging him so tightly? Whoosh, whoosh. At this moment, the sound of wind breaking suddenly came from the distant sky. Immediately, a few figures with terrifying auras descended from the sky. They were surrounded by boundless spiritual power. The leaders were actually two God Emperor experts. One of them was an elder with a head full of white hair who was dressed in a black robe. His cultivation had reached the 6th-stage God Emperor realm. He was the strongest person in the Great Qin Imperial Palace, the great heavenly official, Hu Yan. The remaining person was dressed in heavy armor. He had thick eyebrows and heavy eyes. His righteous aura was like the rising sun that intimidated the universe. This person was the great commander of the Imperial Guards, Yin Zheng, a 5th-stage God Emperor expert. These two people were loyal to Qin Wushuang. In other words, they were not loyal to Qin Wushuang himself, but the master of the Great Qin Empire. Originally, Qin Wupa wanted to use these two people to get rid of Ling Xiao. However, it seemed that there was a problem in one of the links. Emperor Hu Yan and Hu Yan looked at Ling Xiao, Qin Wushuang, and Qin Wupa, who was lying on the ground. The words that were about to come out of their mouths suddenly became hesitant. Great heavenly official, what happened at the Jing'an Palace? Qin Wushuang's pretty face froze slightly. She wiped away the tears on her face without leaving a trace, and asked with a cold expression, Emperor, there are traces of a fight in the Jing'an Palace. 4 divine generals were killed, and their divine souls were taken away. Hu Yan sighed lightly. He seemed to be confused. Is it the same? Great heavenly official, did you find anything else? Qin Wushuang frowned. The uneasiness in her heart grew heavier. Where did this demon come from? How could he come and go as he pleased in the heavily guarded Qin Imperial Palace? No, this is what puzzles this official. With this official's and Commander Yan's perception, the two of us sealed off the entire Qin Palace the moment there was an abnormality in Jing'an Palace. However, the strange thing is that we did not see any suspicious aura escape or appear. Hu Yan looked coldly at Ling Xiao. In the next moment, his eyes suddenly froze. Damn, All of a sudden, he seemed to have discovered an incredible secret. Qin Wupa's death was clearly the same as the four divine generals. Apart from the celestial emperor, only Ling Xiao was left here. Obviously, these two people were the most suspicious. Or could it be that Qin Wupa had seen something he should not have seen and was killed by the emperor and Ling Xiao? Haha, this is really strange. Wu Shuang and I have been in this palace all this time, and we did not feel any strange movements. Could it be that this young master Wupa committed suicide? Ling Xiao grinned. He glanced at the black cat beast in Qin Wushuang's arms with his clear eyes. Indeed, he could not see when Qin Wupa had taken over this little beast. The methods of the Ghost Clan were indeed strange and unpredictable. However, no matter who you took over, the 3,000 points of luck in your body was like the sun in the night sky, dazzling and dazzling. This, Hu Yin and Yin Zheng looked at each other. However, they did not speak. This matter was strange. If he was not killed by Ling Xiao and the emperor, then this Qin Wupa could have really committed suicide. But what was going on with the four guards? Also, just now, the guard said that tonight, Qin Wupa was hosting a banquet in the palace to invite Ling Xiao. You have been in the palace all this time? Emperor, you were really in the palace with the Dragon Master? Yin Zheng frowned. This did not make sense. That's right. However, after hearing Qin Wushuang's confirmation, the great commander of the Imperial Guards also understood. Those guards definitely did not have the guts to lie to him. Therefore, there was a 90% chance that Ling Xiao had attended Qin Wupa's banquet. However, the emperor insisted that she and Ling Xiao had been in the palace all this time. What did this mean? It meant that the two of them were having an affair. What did it mean? She was indeed the great Qin demon emperor. She was so ruthless that she even killed her own brother. As for the evil demon, Qin Wushuang led an army of 200,000 to fight against the three dynasties. In the end, almost 1 million soldiers from both sides died. Only she survived. Was she evil enough? Therefore, in Hu Yin and Yin Zheng's eyes, this great Qin empress was evil enough. It shouldn't be. Who could hide and escape from a sixth-grade god emperor? I guess that evil demon must still be nearby. However, just as Hu Yin and Yin Zheng were about to leave, Ling Xiao suddenly shook his head and said with a serious expression, "Don't worry." Hearing this, Qin Wushuang nodded slightly. However, Hu Yin and Yin Zheng's expression instantly became dull. Dragon Master Ling Xiao, why are you acting? Chapter 480. Seeing the seriousness on Ling Xiao's face, a trace of disdain flashed across the eyes of the two great Qin god emperors. This demon was not just nearby. Wasn't he right in front of them? Qin Wupa's plan was not a complete failure. At the very least, in the eyes of the two great Qin god emperors, Ling Xiao was undoubtedly the most suspicious. After all, when he entered the Jinggan Hall for the banquet, Qin Wupa and his four guards had their divine souls strangely extracted. You said you didn't kill him. Can't you act more realistically? At least point to the distance and tell us that the demon escaped there. However, Ling Xiao acted as if he had never been to the Jinggan Hall, let alone seen any demon. However, although Qin Wupa had calculated many things correctly, he did not make Qin Wushuang fall into his trap. As such, even if everyone thought that Ling Xiao was a demon, she did not believe it. Naturally, it was useless. However, with the Great Sky official's cultivation, if that demon was hiding nearby, it would not be able to escape your eyes. Could it be that the demon is among us? Ling Xiao suddenly thought of something, and a trace of fear flashed across his face. Of course, he did not do all this for fun. Qin Wupa still had a lot of providence on him. Only by revealing the truth step by step and attacking his Tao heart would he be able to squeeze this son of destiny from behind the scenes. Otherwise, how free do you think I am to act with you every day and get scolded by others? Are you going to give me a salary? Plunder providence to make myself stronger. This was a process in itself. As for whether there was a better way to become stronger in the future, that was a matter for the future. In short, the goal of all villains was strength. Hearing this, Hu Yin and Yin Zheng looked at each other. A trace of doubt flashed across the depths of their eyes. What was this Blood Hall Dragon Master, the honorable young master of the great Qin Empire, hiding in his gourd? Was he planning to reveal his identity step by step? Arrogant. Simply arrogant. However, with the Emperor colluding with him, as subjects, what could they do? Of course, they could only quietly watch him show off. Great heavenly official, am I right? Ling Xiao smiled indifferently, and Hu Yin could only smile along. Dragon Lord's words are reasonable. F***CK. If you want to pretend, just pretend. Why do you have to ask us to cooperate with you? Wasn't this exceptionally happy? Then, great heavenly official, who do you think is the devil among us? This old subject is slow-witted. I truly do not know. Hu Yin looked embarrassed, as if 10,000 alpacas were galloping through his heart. I know, but I don't dare to say it. Ha! The great heavenly official and Commander Yin are very loyal, so it can't be them. The Emperor and I have been drinking tea and admiring the moon in the palace all this time, so it can't be them either. Could it be this cat? Ling Xiao suddenly lowered his head and looked at the black cat beast in Qin Wushuang's arms. Instantly, everyone's gazes converged at the same time. On the other hand, Qin Wupa could only feel a chill spreading from the bottom of his heart. All the fur on his body instantly stood on end. Beep! The child of destiny is afraid. Congratulations to host for plundering 500 luck points and 5,000 villain points. F***CK. How is this possible? Could it be that Ling Xiao had seen through it? That shouldn't be the case. My cultivation technique is a classic of the Ghost Clan. How could a mere ant from the lower bounds see through it? And if that wasn't the case, it could only mean that this person was a fool. Such a strange way of thinking was simply intolerable. A cat was a murderous devil? Although he guessed right, he still couldn't shake off the fact that he was a fool. Indeed, when they heard Ling Xiao's words, Hu Yin and Yin Zheng's faces were first shocked, then they laughed out loud. Ha! Dragon Lord's way of thinking really makes us blush with shame. This cat doesn't have a trace of demonic aura. No matter how you look at it, it looks like an ordinary house cat. If it's a devil, Ling Xiao, this cat was raised by my brother Wu Pe since it was young. It can't even be considered a demonic beast. How can it be a devil? Qin Wushuang frowned and looked at Ling Xiao in confusion. I'm just joking. How about this? We still need to remember the devil from a long time ago. The dead are the most important. Why don't we bury Wu Pe first and then slowly investigate? Ling Xiao smiled indifferently. A trace of sadness flashed across Qin Wushuang's beautiful eyes. Oh, since this cat was raised by Wu Pe since it was young, it must have a deep relationship with him. I suggest that we bury it together with Wu Pe. Hearing this, Qin Wushuang's expression froze, and the black cat in her arms suddenly had a trace of extreme fear in its eyes. F***CK. I suspect that you are deliberately targeting me. But why? Could it be that he really saw through the location of my soul? Suddenly, Qin Wu Po's heart had a trace of strong uneasiness. Beep! The child of destinies will is shaken. Congratulations to host for plundering 500 luck points and 5,000 villain points. Hearing the system notification, the smile on Ling Xiao's face grew wider. Then, before Qin Wushuang could open his mouth, he held Qin Wushuang in his hand. Wushuang, I am proficient in a type of secret technique. I can turn this beast into a puppet and maintain its appearance when it was alive. This way, it can stay with Wushuang. Sigh, since it grew up with Wu Pe, I think that if it has some intelligence, it must be heartbroken and want to go with him. Wushuang, look, it seems that it understood what I said. There are some tears in its eyes. Hearing this, Qin Wushuang looked at the black cat in Ling Xiao's hands with surprise. Indeed, she saw that its eyes seemed to be flashing with blue light, and its eyes were a little red. All things have intelligence. Fine, since it wants to go, then let it go with little brother. Qin Wu Pe roared and struggled to break free from Ling Xiao's hands. Where did the tears come from? If not for the fact that Hu Yin and Yin Zheng were beside him, Qin Wu Pe would have used all his strength to kill Ling Xiao on the spot. Forget it. It is too cruel to turn him into a puppet. I have heard that a person who is killed by an evil spirit will have a great amount of resentment left in his body. If we want to help him step into reincarnation, we must cremate him. Only then will we be able to purify his resentment. Sir Hu, am I right? In the end, Ling Xiao sighed softly and turned to look at Hu Yan at the side. This, cough cough, Hu Yan's expression changed several times. Finally, he replied ambiguously, "It seems that there is such a saying in the barbarian race. This is the first time I heard that cremation can purify people's resentment. But what can I do? The two most powerful people in the Great Qin Empire were obviously putting on a show for them. Whatever you say it is." "Wushuang, what do you think?" Ling Zhao's expression was extremely serious. However, his gaze was intentionally looking at Qin Wu Pa in his hands. The people behind the scenes are indeed tenacious and can endure. However, I want to see how long you can endure. For today's tragedy in the Qin Palace, there must be someone to take the blame. What Ling Xiao wanted to do was not to forcefully push the blame on a Qin Wu Pa. Instead, he wanted him to stand out and take the blame himself. This way, it would be firm and stable. He could also capture Qin Wushuang's good impression and turn her from a demon who supports her younger brother into a demon who serves her younger brother. Wouldn't that be great? Chapter 481. Ling Xiao, can you really help Wu Pu enter the cycle of reincarnation? To be honest, Qin Wushuang's mind was already in a mess. Qin Wu Pu died mysteriously in front of the main hall. Even Hu Yin and Yin Zheng did not notice anything wrong. Although she was an empress, she was still a woman. Today, Ling Zhao's actions made her heart, which had been cold for 10 years, feel a trace of warmth. So much so that now, she was instinctively relying on this young man. I'm not sure. But Wu Shuang, as long as it's something that can help Wu Pu, I'll do it. Ling Zhao's expression was solemn. His body was surrounded by immortal clouds, looking like the light of righteousness. My body has merged with a spiritual fire of heaven and earth. This fire is the most young in heaven and earth. It has a strong suppressive effect on resentment and evil arts. Leave it to me. I'll burn Wu Pu and this cat beast together with my natal fire. I'll purify his resentment and the remaining evil qi in his body. I won't let this little beast suffer any pain. Pucci, even with Qin Wu Pu's state of mind, he could not help but spit out a mouthful of blood. In the blink of an eye, he swallowed it down. Burn me with your natal fire? Help me enter the cycle of reincarnation? I'm not dead yet. Who are you sending to reincarnation? I don't need you. Suddenly, Qin Wu Pa felt that his plan wasn't targeted at Ling Xiao at all. He was courting death. Once his identity was exposed, his identity as the devil of the Great Qin would be confirmed. However, if he did not expose himself, he would be burned by Ling Xiao immediately. Life is so difficult. Ling Xiao, I wronged you before. Today, thank you. Qin Wushuang suddenly looked at Ling Xiao with her beautiful eyes. Instantly, Qin Wu Pu's suppressed heart overflowed from the corner of his mouth. Wushuang, you're treating me like an outsider. Have you forgotten that I said that in the future, I'll be your support? Ling Xiao said affectionately with a warm smile. I can't take it. Ling Xiao, if I don't kill you today, what's the use of my cultivation? Qin Wu Pa roared in his heart, but he still didn't dare to make any rash moves. He could use his soul slaves to fight against 3 god emperors, but in that case, perhaps he would completely lose Great Qin's blueprint. 30 years. 30 years of hard work gone down the drain. He was unwilling to accept this, until Ling Zhao's body began to emit flames. That extreme yang aura instantly caused a trace of fear to appear in Qin Wu Pa's eyes. Heaven and earth spirit fire. The rumors were true. This young man had actually fused the spiritual fire into his body. Roar. At the moment of life and death, Qin Wu Pa no longer dared to hesitate. With a flash of his body, he broke free from Ling Zhao's grasp. But before he could escape, a brilliant smile bloomed on Ling Zhao's face. Finally, he couldn't hold it in any longer. Buzz. monstrous spiritual radiance shone from the horizon. In a short instant, it transformed into an ancient diagram that covered the entire Qin palace. Above the ancient diagram, golden light shone brightly. Indistinct images of great lakes, mountains, and divine trees appeared. Immortal traces overlapped with each other. It was indescribably marvelous. It was the great Zhou clan's inherited Dao treasure, the Mountain and Sea Emperor's diagram, that Ling Xiao obtained when he killed the great Zhou ancestor. Since this diagram was regarded as an inheritance by the great Zhou Empire, its power was naturally extremely terrifying. Although Ning Tiance used the battle intent of millions of soldiers to slash it open that day. But if it was just one person, even a 6th or 7th grade God Emperor would find it difficult to break it open. Qin Wupa's methods were strange and unpredictable, but a method was still a method. His current strength was only at the level of a God King. Therefore, when the cat flew to the horizon, it was still frightened by the divine diagram and fell back down. At this moment, looking at the cat flying in the sky, Qin Wushuang and the other two were already stunned. What did I just see? That cat flew to the sky? F***CK. Could it be that Ling Xiao was right? This cat is an evil demon. Haha, it seemed that I was right. There's something wrong with this cat. From the beginning to the end, Ling Xiao's expression was very calm. A cat with luck. Was there something wrong with it? This, Hu Yin and Yin Zheng looked at each other, and the Emperor's aura around them surged like the sea. But just as the two of them were about to pounce on Qin Wupa, the latter's eyes suddenly shone with a dim light. Then, a frightening scene appeared. 3 soul shadows suddenly stepped out from the void, and the aura on their bodies had also reached the Emperor realm. But when they saw the appearance of the 3 people, not only Hu Yin and Yin Zheng, but also Qin Wushuang's pair of beautiful eyes instantly widened. Father! Father! Emperor! 3 exclamations resounded in the Qin palace. In the next moment, an extreme murderous intent suddenly appeared on Qin Wushuang's beautiful face. So, this cat was actually the culprit behind the massacre of the Lord of Jinnan's residence. Beep, the child of destiny is strong, but he was not able to succeed. The plan has completely failed. Congratulations to the host for plundering 500 luck points and 5,000 villain points. Ling Xiao, I will kill you. At this moment, Qin Wupa's mood was more than just resentment. He had painstakingly planned for 30 years, but he did not expect that it would be destroyed by an ant from the lower realm. Most importantly, today's situation was set up by him. Now, it was not that he was willing to expose his identity, but if he did not use his trump card, he was afraid that he would be played to death by Ling Xiao. The golden array above his head was clearly a Dao artifact with terrifying power. If it was in the past, Qin Wupa naturally had 10,000 ways to break this treasure. With his strength when he was alive, he only needed a thought to break the void. But now, if he wanted to escape this place, he could only kill Ling Xiao as soon as possible. As for those 3 soul servants, today, most likely they would die here. Damn! After all this scheming, not only did he not manage to keep his trump card, he even lost his sister. Looking at Qin Wushuang's current appearance, it was obvious that he completely trusted Ling Xiao. Next, the direction of their relationship was very clear. Losing both his soul servant and sister, this was a huge loss. I didn't expect that you were the main culprit of the chaos in my great Qin Empire. Qin Wushuang's eyes also flashed with a strange light. Then, Ling Xiao's eyes were shocked to see that on the ground, there was suddenly ghost qi spreading. Many souls that had been dead for an unknown period of time began to climb out from the ground and stood in front of Qin Wushuang. In just a few breaths' time, there were already thousands of them. So, this was how the great Qin Demon Emperor got his name? Ling Xiao's heart flashed with a flash of understanding. Qin Wupa roared angrily and turned into an afterimage, rushing towards him angrily. At the same time, the eyes of those 3 soul servants suddenly emitted a strange blue light. Each of them blocked Qin Wushuang and the other 2. Wu Ho Ghost Realm. A light reprimand, as if it came from the underworld, contained the intent of death. Ling Xiao's eyes narrowed slightly. Just when he was about to summon the realm, he realized that the world in front of him suddenly changed. Darkness filled the heaven and earth. Faintly, it seemed as if 10,000 ghost shadows walked out from the underworld. Ling Xiao stood in the same place. There was not much panic on his face. The ghost realm in front of him was similar to his dark forbidden zone. It was completely formed by the power of Tao. However, Tao was a supreme divine ability. Even Ling Tian, with his terrifying luck and powerful model, could not achieve this. Obviously, this person from the Ghost Clan must have had a great background when he was alive. Chapter 482. Small Tricks. Ling Xiao smiled indifferently and suddenly raised his palm. In the sky above the ghost realm, a lightning sun suddenly bloomed with divine radiance. The countless ghosts that were roaring ferociously suddenly screamed. Ling Xiao waved his hand, and the sun suddenly crushed the void and suppressed the 10,000 ghosts. Against such evil beings, the power of Yang was naturally the most effective. The complete lightning law was overbearing. Therefore, before the thunder sun had even descended, there were already ghostly shadows hissing and roaring, disappearing into nothingness. However, it was at this moment that a soul seal, flickering with a dim light, suddenly appeared from the sea of ghosts and pressed down on them. There seemed to be evil runes engraved on it, and it contained endless power. The heaven and earth trembled, and ghost energy swept across the sky. The soul seal and the sun collided, and the entire heaven and earth shattered like a mirror. Ling Xiao's eyes darkened and looked at the endless ghosts. At the end of the darkness, a thin soul shadow had appeared out of nowhere. He stood there, commanding the 10,000 ghosts to submit and the lightning to disappear. Qin Wupa. Ling Xiao's expression was calm, but his heart was heavy. He hid his cultivation level, but he was still only at the Divine Lord level. And this Qin Wupa was a 5th-grade Divine King. If it was in the outside world, he had countless ways to kill him. However, in this ghost world, the combat power of the Ghost Clan was obviously more terrifying. Furthermore, Ling Xiao still had a selfish motive in his heart. Qin Wupa was indeed a ghost, but his current identity was still Qin Wushuang's brother. Even if he committed a heinous crime, even Qin Wushuang would not forgive him. However, if he died in Ling Xiao's hands, Qin Wushuang would definitely feel troubled. If he wanted the Empress to submit and be used by him, it would be best if Ling Xiao could quietly eliminate him. Your brother was killed by a demon, and the one I killed was a demon, not Qin Wupa. As such, with the destiny in their hands and their cousin in their hands, who would really care about the true identity of this evil demon? Cousin, I'm lacking love too. Ling Xiao, you really make me angry. Qin Wupa's face was cold, and his eyes were a strange ice blue. Although he was only a divine soul, the ghost energy around him still made the heaven and earth gloomy and the temperature extremely cold. Endless ghost energy formed thousands of ghosts outside his body. The shrill and evil ghost screams seemed to come from the bottom of one's heart. Before the battle even started, it was already terrifying. A 5th-grade Divine King was invincible among the younger generation in Shenzhou. This was what Gue Wupa relied on, and also the proof of his talent. Ling Xiao, do I look like a pig? However, what made Gue Wupu slightly surprised was that Ling Xiao's face did not show much panic from the beginning to the end. It was as if he knew his identity and strength. How is that possible? The plot should not be like this. Shouldn't his eyes tremble, his body tremble, and then say a few words like, "You can't kill me, otherwise I won't let you go," and then be killed by me in a single move? Buzz, if I don't kill you today, Gue Wupa, will be ashamed of being the 3rd successor of the Ghost Clan. Qin Wupa, oh, it should be Gue Wupa, suddenly opened an evil vertical eye in the middle of his forehead. Black light flowed and formed a seal in the air, suppressing Ling Xiao. The seal was surrounded by ghost heads. There was a blood-red light on it, and the heavens and earth were like dragons swimming around. Wherever the black seal passed, thousands of ghosts followed. It was extremely eerie. Qin Wupa used the most powerful superpower of the Ghost Clan, the Curse of 10,000 Ghosts. Under this seal, even if it was a human race divine king powerhouse, they would definitely perish too. However, looking at the seal that crushed the void, Ling Zhao's face did not show the slightest bit of panic. Wind and lightning whistled behind him, and his figure instantly disappeared from the spot. Boom! In the next moment, the ghost seal fell. The void seemed to be unable to withstand such power and instantly cracked. On the other hand, Ling Zhao's figure appeared several feet away. Hide! Let's see how long you can hide. Gue Wupa shouted coldly. The black seal in his vertical eye condensed again. However, no matter what he did, Ling Xiao did not fight him head-on. He just kept dodging. Ling Xiao, do you think you can hide? In my limitless ghost realm, no matter where you hide, you can't escape from my divine soul. Gue Wupa laughed coldly. His eyebrows were gloomy. It's okay. I just need to delay until Wu Shuang and the rest kill your soul slaves. Ling Xiao stood in the void. The two wings behind him, one green and one silver, were beautiful and magical. Ha ha ha. Ling Xiao, you underestimate me. Do you really think, if I wasn't confident, I would stay to kill you? Gue Wupa's eyes flashed with evil. Then he grinned at Ling Xiao. Actually, I should thank you. As long as I can absorb your divine soul, I will have a new identity. Ling Xiao, thank you for risking your life to merge with the spiritual fire for me and subdue the Blood Dragon Temple. Tell me, how should I express my gratitude? Oh, you're so confident that you can keep this realm intact under the attack of 3 Emperor Gods? Ling Xiao raised his eyebrows slightly. The smile on his face grew wider. Gue Wupa's brain was indeed good, unlike Lin Shi. Tian Ming, who came from a small mountain village, had a good temperament. It was just that he lacked foresight. As for Gue Wupa, a demon from the upper world, he had seen a lot of storms. Therefore, they could always find the key to breaking through. That's right. At this moment, Gue Wupa was a stranger. With his identity exposed, his name as a demon was confirmed. However, as long as he could take over Ling Zhao's body, it would be a new situation. Even Ling Zhao's previous efforts could be considered as a wedding dress for him. However, this is a good idea, but are you sure you can kill me? Ha ha! Ling Xiao, although I don't know how you can pretend to be so calm, I have to admit that you're smarter than all the humans I've met. Gue Wupa smiled eerily. However, with your knowledge, I'm afraid it's difficult for you to understand the true meaning of the upper world. The Emperor Gods of the Shenzhou continent only know how to cultivate spiritual energy. They don't know what a divine soul is. Well, since you want to give your body to me, I'll let you die with some understanding. This realm is called Wuqiu. It's formed by a wisp of dark ghost qi from the 9th level of the underworld. If you want to break this realm, you must offer a sacrifice to the Lord of the underworld. Therefore, haha, only one person can walk out of this realm each time. To be honest, I, Gue Wupa, have been roaming the Azure world for 373 years. I've killed tens of thousands of living beings in this realm and turned thousands of ghosts into my slaves. I've never tasted defeat in my life. Ling Xiao, there's no need to struggle. I'll give you a quick death. As soon as he finished speaking, a ghostly fog appeared in Gue Wupa's vertical eyes. Behind him, a ghostly figure seemed to appear out of thin air. Evil patterns rippled around its body. As its aura burst out, there was an indescribable majestic force that covered the heavens and earth. Wait! However, just as Gue Wupa took a step forward and was about to rush towards Ling Xiao, the latter's lips suddenly curled into a smile. I want to ask you 2 questions. Chapter 483. Ling Xiao, stop your futile struggle. As I said, no one in the Shenzhou can break through this realm. Today you must die. Gue Wupu shook his head, his tone indifferent, as if he was the ghost lord who controlled the cycle of life, mysterious and imposing. No, I'm just curious. You've never been defeated in your life. So how did you end up in this desolate land? Ling Xiao frowned and looked at Gue Wupu with a serious expression. Humph. I'm already invincible in the upper realm, so wanted to experience the lower realm. My grandson is called Xiachun. Do you know him? Before Gue Wupu could finish his sentence, Ling Xiao interrupted him with a faint smile. What? In an instant, Gue Wupu's face turned pale. Seeing the fear and hatred in his eyes, Ling Xiao had an answer in his heart. Obviously, the reason why a ghost clan genius with so much luck ended up in this realm was most likely karma. As the biggest stepping stone in and out of the movie, the only thing Ling Xiao had that was related to the ghost clan was the soul-sucking ghost pearl. Gue Wupu was most likely the ghost clan genius that was killed by Xiachun. The reason why his providence was higher than Xiachun's was probably because he was going to die earlier than Xiachun. The higher his cultivation level, the higher his providence would be. In this life, the two of them were supposed to fight for the heavenly fate. Unfortunately, they met Ling Xiao one after the other. Therefore, karma was something that, once tainted, would lead to retribution. Who are you? Gue Wupu exhaled softly, his expression gradually calming down. Xiachun's name was not known to anyone in this realm. No wonder he felt uneasy when he first saw Ling Xiao. It was obvious that this seemingly weak human ant was hiding some secrets that he didn't know. That's right. In his previous life, he died at the hands of Xiachun. In other words, he was only a wisp of his soul that had managed to escape. He had borrowed the power of the soul-devouring ghost orb to descend to the lower realm. Back when he was killed by Xiachun, he had used the soul-devouring ghostly pearl's artifact soul as a medium to shatter the void and open up a realm rift. Only then had a wisp of his soul escaped and possessed the body of this young marquis of Great Qin, who was born with a missing soul and was called trash by others. According to the original plot, Gue Wupu should have used this body to secretly rise up and finally become destiny. Unfortunately, he had arrived in a world of great strife and encountered Ling Xiao. In the Shengzhou, monstrous geniuses had emerged in large numbers, and the mandate of heaven was everywhere. Who could fight against the Tao of heaven and stand at the top of the world? No one could say for sure until the very end. However, to be able to step on the heavens' wills and become a paragon, one would definitely become the true main character of this vast world. Sometimes, Ling Xiao would wonder why there were so many children of destiny in a mere small and desolate region of the lower realms. Could there be other secrets hidden in the Shengzhou continent? Look at what this is. Ling Xiao smiled faintly. His eyes overflowed with blood-red light. The soul-devouring ghostly pearl instantly broke through the air and quietly floated 3 feet above his head. Saint Pearl! Gue Wupu's expression changed drastically. His already pale face was completely drained of blood. He guessed that this young man named Ling Xiao in front of him had an extraordinary background. It was even possible that he came from the same realm as him. However, he could not figure out how the ghost race's sacred artifact had ended up in this young man's hands. Beep. The child of destiny's Tao heart is unstable. Congratulations to the host for plundering 500 luck points and 5,000 villain points. So, I guess I won't die today. Ling Xiao smiled eerily. Spiritual light shot up into the sky from his body. The soul-devouring ghostly pearl suddenly emitted a demonic blood-red light. It was like a red cloud that covered thousands of miles of the sky and dyed the world in its color. Under the blood-red light, thousands of ghosts mourned and turned into soul lights that were devoured by the soul-devouring ghostly pearl. However, to Ling Xiao's surprise, after the initial shock, Gue Wupu's lips suddenly curled into a smile. Then, he directly reached out his palm and gently touched the blood-red light that had devoured countless soul slaves in this realm. Ling Xiao's eyes narrowed slightly and his brows furrowed. He was more or less on guard against this monster from the Ghost Clan. Gue Wupu was the strongest opponent he had encountered so far, whether in terms of temperament or strength. Moreover, The prodigies of the upper realm were not something that the country bumpkins of the Shengzhou could compare to. Ling Xiao, I really want to thank you more and more, Gui Wupu said softly. Ghostly patterns wrapped around his pale white palm and converged into a cursed seal that pressed down on the blood-red light. The expected vibration in the void did not appear. Not even a trace of spiritual power was released. The blood-red light that was originally terrifying suddenly stopped. Then, it directly turned into a rain of blood that sprinkled from the sky and disappeared without a trace. I used my original soul to nourish this pearl for 203 years and finally helped it to give birth to a strand of soul consciousness, evolving into spiritual intelligence. Back then, it was because of this pearl soul that I was able to escape at the critical moment and was reborn. Gui Wupu muttered to himself. His gaze was gentle as he reached out with both hands and caught the falling blood-red light. Even if its soul is now broken, but how could it bear to hurt me? Ling Xiao, thank you. No matter who you are or how you got this pearl, I should thank you for returning it to me. You really are the owner of this pearl. Ling Xiao nodded and chuckled. He was not the least bit flustered by his attack being blocked. The soul-sucking ghost pearl was indeed a trump card in his hand, but he had more than one trump card. It's over. Gui Wupu stood with his hands behind his back and looked up at Ling Xiao. The soul light in his vertical eye turned into a palm that covered the sky and enveloped the entire realm. Under the palm, heaven and earth were overturned, and there was no escape. But this time, Ling Xiao had no intention of dodging. Since the world god emperor could not break it, and Gui Wupu could not remove it, he naturally had no more scruples. The void began to darken and gradually turn dark. It was as if all the light in the world had been swallowed up. A black moon began to float in Ling Xiao's eyes, and Dao sounds began to resound around him. Boom! But before he could do anything, the soul palm had already swept across. It completely suppressed him and the entire realm. Gui Wupu's eyes flashed with a smile. It was a sincere smile. Since the soul-sucking ghost pearl was here, it did not matter who he was or what he was scheming. As long as he could take back the Saint Pearl, no one in this realm would be a match for him. Devouring the souls of all living beings in this realm to forge his path to becoming a supreme being. Now, it seemed that this tribulation was his good fortune. But just as Gui Wupu was pondering, and a smile gradually appeared on his face. Suddenly, an ear-piercing buzzing sound came from the Wu Ho ghost realm. Immediately after, he was dumbstruck when he saw a wisp of deep and dark devilish light flickering at the place where the soul palm landed. Then, thousands of demonic lights shot up into the sky and pierced through the firmament. Along with the soul palm, it was smashed into pieces. Chapter 484. This aura, Gui Wupu's eyes were gloomy, and his face finally turned serious. However, when he saw the figure that walked out of the soul light, his eyes inexplicably showed a trace of extreme fear. The demonic aura that was like the sea seemed to cover up all the light in the world. The world lost its color, and there were no more immortals or gods in the world. The river and the sea went against the current, and only I controlled the world. The demonic cultivator overturned the immortal path and broke the firmament. After going through all the calamities, I raised my head to the 9 heavens. That kind of domineering aura that looked down on the world was natural, and it came from the heart. It was not something that could be cultivated. This was a great demon, so great that it could kill immortals and gods, change the cycle of reincarnation, and even suppress the heavenly Tao. Beep, the chosen one is afraid. Congratulations to the host for plundering 500 luck points and 5,000 villain points. How can this be? How can there be such a ferocious demon in the lower realm? Even with Gui Wupu's experience, he still could not tell that the person in front of him was not a great demon. It was the only true demon in the world, the immemorial sky demon. Gui Wupu knew this name. In the upper realm, no one dared to mention its true name. As for why so many people in the desolate holy state knew about the sky demon and called it by its name, the ignorant were fearless. 300 years ago, the sky demon came to the Shengzhou and massacred the world. Not long after, the sky demon was killed by the holy church, and a master god became an immortal in the eyes of the world. After that, the believers of the holy church went out of the central border and preached everywhere, talking about the master god's great achievement of killing the sky demon. For the people of the Shengzhou, they did not know the true power of the sky demon, so they probably did not know the true strength of this primordial demon. Ignorant ants, who could not even raise their heads. How could they know the vastness of the world? In fact, Gui Wupu would scoff at the mention of the heavenly demon. If the descendant of the sky demon really appeared in the desolate little world, this place would have become a desolate place. As for the legendary sky demon slain by the divine lord, not to mention the people of this world, even a master of his world was nothing in front of the sky demon. Kill the sky demon? Poochie. Buzz. Ling Xiao stood in the air with his hands behind his back. The demonic qi outside his body turned into a shadow, vaguely resembling a human head and dragon claws. Surging blood, qi covered the sky. He stood there like a king yang furnace, a cauldron that could refine heaven and earth, emitting the most extreme yang heat. Deity overlord, you have indeed concealed your cultivation. Gui Wupu was no longer as calm as before. His evil eyes were filled with panic. Gui Wupu didn't know why, but even though this fiendish devil's cultivation base wasn't very high, the mere sight of him caused Gui Wupu's heart to palpitate with fear, and he wanted to submit to him. I don't believe that you can suppress me. In the end, Gui Wupu gritted his teeth and unleashed a powerful palm strike. In front of him, the void shattered as a white bone palm emitted a monstrous power. The crystal-clear color faintly gave off a sense of holiness. The divine aura in the sky surged like waves, and the heavens trembled. The entire void ghost realm let out an ear-piercing shriek. Boom! Boom! The bone palm seemed slow, but it moved at an almost eternal speed toward Ling Xiao, causing the sound of the Tao to vibrate. Before it even landed, the ghosts in the realm had already knelt down and let out shrill and fearful cries. Countless strange phenomena began to appear. The space in front of him seemed to be unable to withstand such a mighty force, and a violent wind howled. The ghost race's means are just SOSO. However, in the face of such a shocking attack, Ling Xiao's face was still calm. Then he slowly raised his hand, clenched it into a fist, and gently punched the bone palm. Clang, clang, clang. At this moment, Gui Wupu could hear his heart trembling violently. There was also the sound of a huge bell in his ears that struck his mind. His blood qi was like a tidal wave, intimidating all evil. The void began to distort. Behind Ling Xiao, the terrifying demonic shadow also threw out a punch to meet the huge white bone palm that was pressing down. Crack! The crisp sound of bones breaking instantly resounded in the realm. Gui Wupu looked at the bone palm that stopped in midair with fear. In just a short moment, it was already covered with countless cracks. Break! Ling Xiao's face was still calm. He said one word, and the huge bone palm instantly shattered in a soul light and disappeared. How is this possible? Gui Wupu's body trembled, and panic appeared on his face. The palm just now was one of the most terrifying moves in the scripture that he had cultivated. Even so, it was easily broken by the demon in front of him. All of a sudden, Gui Wupu felt a chill down his spine. I don't believe it. I don't believe it. Dark Inyama Sutra, burn my soul and sacrifice it to the Nine Serenity's demonic sword. Gui Wupu screamed, his face full of resentment. The tens of thousands of ghostly shadows that had been standing behind him suddenly raised their heads and let out a deafening wail. Then, they turned into soul light and gathered toward Gui Wupu. A soul sword that was 100 feet long drew the outline of a great force. There seemed to be Tao patterns flowing on it, and ghosts were flickering, but it did not appear evil. This was an extremely terrifying sword, and also the most powerful killing move in the Ghost Clan scripture. With one sword, the universe was broken, yin and yang were in chaos, and immortals and Buddhas were killed. Facing this sword that could split open the sky, Ling Xiao's face turned solemn. The successor of the Ghost Clan, the upper world's demon, and a divine king expert. This Gui Wupu was indeed the destiny behind the scenes. The premise of pretending to be a pig was that you had to be able to eat a tiger. If you were a sheep, no matter how much you pretended to be a pig, it was useless as a hammer. But, even so, he could not escape death today. At this moment, Ling Xiao still only stretched out one hand and made a grasping motion. A ray of black light that seemed to come from ancient times turned into a pitch-black blade. Demonic intent surged on it, and endless Tao laws intertwined in the void to form a seal. The divine power was vast. The sword intent that filled the world suddenly stopped, as if it was afraid, and began to retreat like the tide. Nine Netherworld sword, slash. Seeing this, Gui Wupu's eyes became more panicked, but there was no way out. He could only clench his teeth and stretched out his hand to grab the Netherworld sword, and then slashed at the demonic shadow above his head. Buzz! The world was silent, as if it was wailing. Countless strange phenomena appeared where the sword's shadow passed, and its power was like the punishment of the heavens. On the other hand, Ling Xiao merely swung his saber with a calm expression. There was even a trace of disdain on his handsome face. At the end of the sky, there was suddenly a demonic light that was like the sun. In a short time, it turned into a huge star and fell from the sky. The mighty demonic power suppressed the heavens, illuminated thousands of worlds, and shocked the ancient times. Then, a deep voice that had experienced the vicissitudes of time suddenly sounded in Gui Wupu's mind. The primordial era, the punishment of the heavens. A blade light that was 100 feet long, like the Milky Way hanging upside down, revealed an indestructible aura and fell quickly towards the soul sword. Such a demonic power would make even a divine emperor expert afraid, let alone a divine king, and temporarily avoid it. Boom! The moment the blade and sword collided, the rules of the great Tao collapsed. Countless demonic patterns and ghostly shadows were instantly shattered, and an indescribable power covered thousands of miles of the sky. Finally, the spiritual light on the soul sword was annihilated and began to dissipate. However, the immemorial blade light did not weaken, and slashed at Gui Wupu angrily. No! Gui Wupu's aura surged violently, and a glaring light erupted from his originally dim soul body. Majestic heavenly power burst out from his body, and the mountains and rivers rose and fell in a magnificent manner. Then, under Ling Xiao's surprised gaze, he used all the strength in his body, and under the lock of Ling Xiao's soul consciousness, to move an inch away. In today's situation, if he did not escape, he would certainly die. Ling Xiao was strong, but he was still a demon. Gui Wupu was gambling on the power of this blade, gambling on whether Ling Xiao would dare to reveal his true identity in front of Qin Wushuang and the others. Only in this way could he find a chance of survival in the midst of chaos. Chapter 485. Buzz. The heaven-punishing saber will slash down, creating a 100-foot-long crack in the Wulin ghost realm that was said to be connected to the underworld. Half of Gui Wupu's body was completely shattered by the saber. However, at this moment, he actually paid no attention to it. His figure flashed and instantly fled towards the spatial crack. Ling Xiao, the news that you are a true demon will soon spread throughout the western border. Let's see how you can keep up the pretense, then. Gui Wupu's voice was filled with hatred. However, as soon as he finished speaking, a ray of light appeared in the world in front of him. Then, mountains and rivers appeared in front of him. Rich spiritual qi rolled like waves. It was like an otherworldly land. Gui Wupu was in midair. Half of his soul had been shattered by the demonic saber. He looked extremely miserable. However, there was no sign of pain on his face. Instead, there was a hint of excitement. Could it be, by chance, I have accidentally entered a peerless immortal land? Yes, that must be it. As the saying goes, misfortune may be a blessing in disguise. After great misfortune, there will be great fortune. Ha ha ha, I, Gue Wupu, am indeed the Ghost Clan's destiny. Xia Chen can't kill me, so you Ling Xiao can't kill me either. As for the injuries to his soul, judging from the rich spiritual qi here, it would only take a few months to recover. He just didn't know which realm Ling Xiao's saber had split open. Was this Shengzhou or another small realm? Gue Wupu's eyes flashed with fear when he thought of the power contained in Ling Xiao's saber light. He couldn't figure out how a 16 or 17-year-old boy could have so many secrets. Why was the soul-sucking ghost pearl in his hands? What was the strange Tao in the saber force? How did he hide the secret of his demonic body and cultivate to the divine overlord realm? Although Xia Chun was already terrifying enough, a person who ascended from the lower world had cultivated from the first stage divine emperor to the half-exalted realm in just a few decades and became the killer emperor. Gue Wupu had guessed that there must be some shocking secret hidden in the Shengzhou. Perhaps this was the ancestral ground of some supreme expert, which was why such a monstrous genius could be born here. However, Xia Chun was already a once-in-a-thousand-years genius. Why did it feel like this Ling Xiao was even more impressive than Xia Chun? Forget it. There was no point in thinking too much. The most important thing now was to recover his strength as quickly as possible. Now that his identity had been exposed, it would be difficult for him to return to the Great Qin Empire. It seemed like he had to change his identity and rearrange his plans. Only then would he be able to prove his Tao. Ling Xiao, you are strong. But in this world, it was more interesting to have an opponent. The stronger you are, the more rewards I will receive when I trample you under my feet. That saber, the soul-sucking ghost pearl, as long as these two treasures are in my hands, I, Gue Wupu, will no longer be the third successor of the Ghost Clan, but the Lord of Azure. Needless to say, the Tao heart of these so-called people of destiny was terrifying. Even though he had suffered such a setback, he did not become dispirited and lost. Instead, he became even more determined. Buzz. Suddenly, a loud and clear buzzing sound could be heard between heaven and earth. Gue Wupu's originally dim soul aura suddenly became dazzling and dazzling. He was originally a 5th-grade divine king, but now he was a 6th-grade divine king. Beep! The Tao heart of the chosen child has transformed. His cultivation level has increased. Luck points have increased by 1,000 points. In the sky above the realm, Ling Xiao stood with his hands behind his back. He looked coldly at the soul shadow below, and the corners of his mouth curled into a playful smile. This was naturally Ling Xiao's realm. To be honest, Ling Xiao did not expect the heaven-punishing saber style to be so domineering. When the saber landed, not only did it shatter Gue Wupu's shocking sword, it even created a void crack in the Wumin realm of ghosts. However, no matter how fast Gue Wupu was, how could he be faster than Ling Xiao's soul remembrance? The moment the void crack appeared, the Genesis yellow sacred body in the realm used the power of the realm to completely envelop the Wumin realm of ghosts. As for Gue Wupu, he was naturally trapped in this cage. In this place, no matter how powerful Gue Wupu was and how mysterious his origin was, he was still a fish on the chopping board, waiting to be slaughtered by Ling Xiao. However, what surprised Ling Xiao was that Gue Wupu could still break through his cultivation level with his soul remembrance and increase his luck by 1,000 points. Wonderful. This guy no longer had to pretend to be a pig. He could transform into a pig directly. If he were to grow fatter, would he be even more delicious? His identity as the Sky Demon could not be exposed. Otherwise, there would be endless trouble. Originally, Ling Xiao had planned to send this Ghost Clan genius to the reincarnation cycle. However, he suddenly changed his mind at this moment. A spiritual herb suddenly appeared in his hand. It shone with 7-color divine light, and one could tell at a glance that it was not an ordinary item. This herb was called the 7 Profound Soul Herb. It was a supreme immortal item, and also a treasure that Yuan Yu's sacred ground had kept for hundreds of years. However, now that he had Han Zhan, the medicine king of Heavenly Hall, he could have as many immortal herbs and spiritual flowers as he wanted. What I lack are spiritual ingredients. Damn! What I lack are slaves who can refine these spiritual ingredients into elixirs. However, with the soul power contained in this spiritual herb, even if he ate it directly, there would be endless benefits. Gui Wupu, please don't disappoint me. Ling Xiao grinned and carefully placed the soul herb in the mountain below. This was the westernmost part of the realm. There were no other living creatures within a few thousand miles. For the time being, Gui Wupu would not encounter Xing Shun and the others. Given his current state, he would not dare to run around carelessly. He would cultivate in peace and recover his strength. Then, what would happen when a pig became fat? Of course, he would kill it and eat it. With Gui Wupu's divine soul, although he could not sense Ling Xiao's presence, he could easily sense the fluctuation of the 7 Profound Soul Herb. In the next moment, he suddenly dashed out and appeared on the mountain peak. His eyes narrowed. This is the soul-dissolving herb. Ha ha ha! The heavens are helping me. The heavens are helping me. At this moment, Gui Wupu was even more convinced that he was blessed by the heavens. Otherwise, how could such a spiritual herb of heaven and earth appear in front of him so coincidentally? Moreover, when he was severely injured and weak, this was the so-called protection of the heavenly Tao. Of course, if Ling Xiao knew what he was thinking, he would probably wet his pants. The heavenly Tao? If I become the heavenly Tao in the future, it will be the time when immortals and demons rebel. For 3 consecutive days, Ling Xiao did not leave the realm. Instead, he quietly sat in the void and focused on cultivating. Gui Wupu was pleasantly surprised to find that he seemed to have accidentally stumbled into a treasure trove of immortal land. There were spiritual herbs and immortal mushrooms everywhere. In just 3 days, his cultivation had recovered by more than half. On the 4th day, when Gui Wupu found another emerald net immortal fruit in the mountains, a serious look finally appeared on his face. Chapter 486. This immortal herb and spiritual fruit can help me recover my cultivation quickly, but it's a waste to eat it like this. Gui Wupu frowned as he stared at the green immortal fruit in his hand. This fruit was extremely beautiful and was the culmination of heaven and earth. It wasn't inferior to the dark soul grass in the slightest. Now that his soul had almost recovered, if he could refine this fruit into a pill to help him break through to the 7th grade Divine King realm, he would have nothing to fear even if he met Ling Xiao again. The Dark Inyama scripture was a classic of the Ghost Clan. There were hundreds of ancient secret skills in it, and it was extremely powerful. Every time he broke through to the next level, the Dark Inyama scripture would automatically create a new attack. By then, Ling Xiao, haha, I will let you know the horror of the Ghost Clan's classic. Gui Wupu had regained his confidence after a few days of good fortune. After surviving a great disaster, there would be good fortune in the future. Then, there would be a comeback and the plot would reach its climax. Logically speaking, that should be the case. But Gui Wupu would never have thought that the good fortune in his eyes was just something that Ling Xiao threw away casually. After he figured it out, Gui Wupu's eyes flashed and a stone pillar appeared on the peak of the mountain. Endless ghost chi spread for thousands of miles. Everywhere it passed, ancient trees withered and flowers withered. In the void, Ling Xiao's eyes suddenly opened. A ray of immortal light seemed to have evolved from the primordial chaos. It was clear and mysterious, mixed with a wisp of purple chi. His aura had reached the 5th grade Divine Lord realm, and his destiny forging points had increased by 6%. In the system, 10,000 destiny points and 70,000 villain points were all gone. The western border was indeed more suitable for villains to cultivate. Ling Xiao lowered his head and looked at the ghost Qi. He saw a stone pillar covered with runes standing on the peak of the mountain. On top of it, an old and weak soul figure was bound by chains and shackled like a corpse. Gue Wupu was staring at him with a sinister look. However, what was strange was that his soul had already recovered, but at this moment, he was pretending to be weak. In fact, his cultivation level had even dropped to the level of a 5th-level divine king. Old Dan, how about we discuss this? Demons will surely suffer the wrath of the heavens. Old Dan snorted coldly, but Ling Xiao's eyes suddenly trembled. Dan Lao, looking at that old man's cultivation, it was obvious that he had already stepped into the God-Emperor realm. Although Ling Xiao did not know how Gue Wupu had imprisoned him here, the name Dan Lao alone was enough to make one's imagination run wild. Ha ha ha! Since old Dan hates evil devils so much, I'll tell you a huge secret. Gue Wupu's eyes were gloomy, and his voice was filled with resentment. Your good disciple Qin Yu is a devil himself. Bullshit! Pill Elder shouted angrily. However, in the blink of an eye, a hint of hesitation appeared on his face. Qin Yu's talent was something that he had never seen before, but for some reason, he felt a faint sense of uneasiness in his heart. The devil flame's might was monstrous. Even when he was at his peak, he could only seal it in a Tao artifact and unleash a wisp of heaven's might. At that time, if he hadn't been forced by the situation, he naturally wouldn't have dared to easily seal it in Qin Yu's body. But although Qin Yu was extremely talented and had a high level of comprehension, he was still a pawn cultivator. The ancient technique that he grasped was found by chance in an ancient secret realm. In the entire Xingzhou, it was likely that no one at the pawn level could fuse the spirit flame into their body. Regarding his methods, Pill Elder was not worried. But the devil intent contained in the spirit flame was not easy to suppress. Once Qin Yu lost control of his mind, it was very likely that he would turn into a devil. And from Qin Wupu's words, it was likely that he had already seen Qin Yu. Inexplicably, Pill Elder did not know whether he should be happy or sad. As long as Qin Yu was alive, his efforts would not be in vain. But once he turned into a devil, he would have to walk on the path of becoming an enemy of the entire world. The people of the sacred sect were cruel to divine punishment, and they hated the word devil even more. Thus, there had been no evil devils in the Shengzhou for 100 years. The most recent one was 110 years ago, when those few exceptional great devils appeared in the Shengzhou. But in the end, they disappeared without a trace. It was not that there were no devils in the Shengzhou, it was just that before they could mature, they were killed by the world. Yua, no matter what, Master only wants you to live. Pill Elder sighed in his heart, but his expression gradually calmed down. The aura on Qin Wupu's body was clearly weak. It was likely that he had just been seriously injured. And since he coveted the spirit flame, it was likely that he had attacked Qin Yu. In that case, Yuer's current strength had already reached such a tyrannical level, as expected of the disciple of Pill Emperor Shi. In a short 3 years, he had already reached the level of an emperor. Would I be able to see him again in this life? Even if I were to die once, I would have no regrets. Haha, Pill Elder, I know that you have always been worried about your precious disciple. How about we make a deal? As long as you can help me refine a pill, I will return your freedom. Gue Wupu's mouth suddenly raised into a smile. As long as he could reach the 7th stage God King level, he would have the means to break the seal on Pill Elder's soul sea. At that time, even if he returned his freedom, he would have already become his slave. With the two of them working together, there was no need to fear that Ling Xiao would not die. As the mastermind behind the scenes, this was not called sinister, it was called method. After all, he was killing Ling Xiao, the villain. The human race was the enemy of the ghost race. Killing decisively and remembering hatred was the quality of a protagonist. What? Are you serious? Pill Elder narrowed his eyes. A trace of hesitation flashed across his face. He had been imprisoned by Gue Wupu for 3 years. In these 3 years, he could clearly feel that his soul power was gradually being devoured by Gui Wupu, and his soul level had fallen from the 6th stage God King level to the 2nd stage God King level. He was afraid that in 3 years, when he fell from the God King level, Gui Wupu would forcibly break the seal in his soul sea and completely control him. Pill Elder had already experienced this evil demon's methods. That kind of evil soul technique did not seem to belong to this world at all. This Gui Wupu must have a great background. Otherwise, he would not have been able to kill the emperor of a dynasty so openly and play with the western border in the palm of his hand. Ha! Pill Elder, I'm willing to swear on my Tao heart that as long as you can help me refine a pill to help my soul recover, I will let you go. Gui Wupu's eyes flashed with a trace of gloom. He was very good at controlling people's hearts. If he had made such a request on a normal day, Pill Elder would have been afraid. But at this time, his aura was obviously very weak. With the old man's strength, he most likely did not take him seriously. But I only promised to let you go, but I did not promise not to do anything to you. The only thing Pill Elder could rely on now was the seal in his soul sea. Gui Wupu had not been able to break it in 3 years. So what if he recovered his cultivation? Therefore, in the old man's eyes, this deal had nothing to lose. That's what you said. I can refine pills, but I don't have any spiritual materials. Finally, Pill Elder snorted and said with a cold expression, How can I ask Pill Elder to refine pills for me? I have spiritual materials here. Gui Wupu's face lit up. Humans were indeed insatiable. Although he had lost 3 soul slaves a day before yesterday, he had Pill Elder and countless spiritual materials in this world. Isn't it just a matter of time if I want to create a few God Kings? Chapter 487. Interesting. Ling Xiao stood proudly in the air and looked down at the 2 soul shadows coldly. The corners of his mouth curled into a playful smile. Gui Wupu's trick was indeed brilliant. He pretended to be weak to make the old man let down his guard, then swore on his Tao heart to make a fortune, making him fall into his trap. Ling Xiao did not know why Gui Wupu did not refine Dan Lao into a slave. However, the divine souls of those who played with pills were much more powerful than those of the same level. Dan Lao was able to seal the heaven and earth spirit fire in River Feather's body, so he must be very powerful. However, shameless. Gui Wupu was really shameless. He even tricked the old man. How could he be called the mandate of heaven? But all of a sudden, Ling Xiao felt that Gui Wusul's trick was somewhat familiar. F***CK. Dan Lao, I have some spiritual materials to recover your divine soul. See if you need anything else. I'll look for more. Gui Wupu waved his hand, and the soul lock that imprisoned Dan Lao loosened, but did not disappear. Then, he handed the green net spirit fruit and some spiritual herbs to Dan Lao. Dan Lao, you understand, right? After all, you're an Emperor Realm expert. If I let you go now, I'm afraid. I'll let you go as soon as you finish refining the pills and help me recover my divine soul. Ling Xiao's eyes narrowed. Gui Wupu was obviously competing with him for the Asaika Golden Man. The highest level of acting was to make it look real and immerse oneself in it. If Gui Wupu acted too carelessly, Dan Lao would be suspicious. His concern dispelled Dan Lao's doubts. You're an Emperor Realm expert. I'm so scared. So, you can help me refine pills. I can't beat you. Great. Gui Wupu, you're really my little drama queen. Every word and action of yours has an ulterior motive. Green net spirit fruit? Dan Lao's face trembled. He looked down at the spirit fruit in his hand with a trace of shock in his eyes. Even in his eyes, such a spiritual material could be considered a heavenly fortune. If he was at his peak, he could use this fruit as the main ingredient to refine a 7th grade pill. But now, I can use this to concoct a peerless grade soul nourishing pill. It's in the upper 6th grade category. Sigh, what a pity. If I can get a drop of rock jade spirit marrow that contains the essence of earth and stone, this pill will definitely enter the 7th grade category. Elder Dan's eyes were solemn, while Gue Whoopa frowned. Elder Dan, where does the rock jade spirit marrow grow? Usually, it will be nurtured at the peak of the spirit mountain in the Half-Een and Half-Yang mountain rocks. However, this marrow needs to go through hundreds of years before it can condense into a drop. Pill Elder sneered. What? Are you going to give me a drop now? However, before he could stop laughing, he saw Gue Whoopu nod his head with a serious look on his face. Then, he turned around and walked towards the mountain peak. Oh, then please wait a moment, Pill Elder. Rock Jade Essence? At the same time, Ling Xiao raised his eyebrows slightly. He took out a drop of white chalcedony from his Chinquan bag and threw it onto a black rock at the peak of the mountain. He didn't have the rock Jade's spirit marrow. After all, it wasn't a precious treasure. However, this drop of earth core chalcedony was a rare spiritual item. The earth essence it contained was 10 times more powerful than the rock Jade's spirit marrow. In order to help Gue Whoopa find this marrow, Ling Xiao even took out a Dao cauldron from his Chinquan ring and placed it on the rock. Damn, that Pill Elder was obviously a Dao soul body. His spiritual weapon must have been taken away by someone else. He didn't know if Gue Whoopa had a cauldron, but the two of you had better hurry up. Otherwise, you'll have to come out to find a cauldron. As expected, when Gue Whoopa appeared at the peak of the mountain, he immediately saw the ancient green cauldron and the drop of white chalcedony beside it. This, even with Gue Whoopa's temperament, he couldn't help but be stunned. What the hell? What is this? Someone sent me a pillow just when I wanted to sleep? Could it be that I, Gue Whoopu, have such terrifying luck? Whatever I lack, Daddy Heavenly Dao will send me. Suddenly, Gue Whoopa knelt on the ground and kowtowed twice towards the void. At this moment, he felt a great sense of mission and responsibility. The Heavenly Dao was protecting him. If he couldn't become the supreme of heaven and earth, it would be a disgrace to his luck. What? I'm brainless? How can I not see through such a fake trick? Damn, which son of destiny didn't have soul herbs appearing when he wanted to refine his soul? Divine beasts falling when he wanted to refine his body? What's the fuss about? When Gue Whooper returned to Pill Elder with the chalcedony in his hands, the latter's expression froze. Damn, this is geocentric chalcedony. Are you sure Gue Whoopa isn't acting? He gave me what I wanted. Originally, Pill Elder only wanted to use the Jade Net spiritual fruit to refine a 6th grade elixir for Gue Whoopa. After all, this damn thing was evil and ruthless. It was necessary to be careful. However, who would have thought that not only did he find the spiritual marrow, but it was also a drop of geocentric spiritual marrow. If I can't refine a 7th grade elixir, will he use this as an excuse to kill me? Pill Elder, what do you think of this marrow? Gue Whoopa smiled faintly, as if he was at ease. This marrow is wonderful. However, in this desolate place, I don't have a Dao. No, as long as there is a divine cauldron, I also have Buzz. Before Pill Elder could finish his words, Gue Whoopa waved his hand, and an ancient cyan cauldron appeared in his hand. Pill Elder, I have a Dao cauldron. Pill Elder almost vomited blood. In the end, he suppressed the anger in his heart and nodded with a smile. Looks like you're well prepared. Pill Elder, you flatter me. Gue Whoopa smiled coldly and handed the Dao cauldron to Pill Elder. Pill Elder, please start your performance. Since you want to refine a 7th grade elixir, this process may take a long time. You'd better be mentally prepared. Pill Elder held the cauldron in one hand and put the spiritual materials into it with the other. He turned his soul into fire and sat down calmly. Since this evil demon swore on his Dao heart, he wouldn't dare to break his oath. This evil demon's Dao heart wasn't stable to begin with. That was why he could kill people as he pleased. If he was troubled by his heart devil again, it would be a disaster for his cultivation journey. After understanding this, Pill Elder didn't hesitate anymore. He changed the seal in his hand, and a spiritual aura appeared around him. Seeing this, Gue Whoopa's lips curled up into a smile. A 7th grade elixir was a supreme treasure in the entire western border. Now that he had just stepped into the 6th grade Divine King realm, he could use this opportunity to stabilize his realm. At that time, he would complete the elixir, break through, and control this old thing. Then, the two of them would work together to kill Ling Xiao. With the ghost pearl, the demonic blade, and the spiritual fire, who else in this world could be worthy of being my opponent? Haha, compared to losing his soul slaves, identity, and even his dynasty. Obviously, what he got this time was countless times more precious. Gue Wupa, have lost once. I swear I won't lose again. Chapter 488. Within the realm, a vast spiritual aura surged. Ling Xiao sat cross-legged in the void, closed his eyes and focused, and carefully sensed the Tao of this realm. Now, with the 4 dragons formation, the world was filled with purple clouds. With the devouring speed of the holy being of absolute beginning, Ling Xiao did not need to cultivate. 1 year was enough for him to enter the Divine King stage. 3 days passed in the blink of an eye. For 3 whole days, Ling Xiao did not leave half a step, afraid that he would miss the show before him. After all, Gue Wupu was from the upper world, and his methods and temperament were not something that the heavenly fate of this realm could compare to. As long as he was alive, Ling Xiao would feel uneasy. Of course, it was also a good idea to keep him here. But fate was something that could not be explained. 6th grade Divine King, 1,900 points of fate. This pig was about to be slaughtered. After all, there were still rewards for killing him. Moreover, Gue Wupu had already given Ling Xiao many unexpected surprises. Although Dan Lao's cultivation had fallen to the 2nd grade Divine Emperor, his alchemy skills were comparable to the moon of Xianyuan. He alone was 100 times stronger than the dozens of geniuses who were refining pills. As for the great Qin Empire, haha, as long as it was a woman, she would definitely fall for the trick of loosening the reins only to grasp them better. Unless you were really too ugly or too short. Now, Qin Wushuang clearly had some special feelings for Ling Xiao. He even promised that as long as he could kill her father's murderer, she would be willing to give herself to him. In this way, as long as the one who returned alive was Ling Xiao, the Empress would definitely submit. Baby, did you miss me these past few days? At the peak of the mountain, a medicinal fragrance began to spread. Outside Dan Lao's body, the soul light gradually became brighter, and in the cauldron in front of him, a surge of soul power quietly filled the entire mountain. Not far away, Gue Wupu's eyes shone. It was as if as long as this grade 7 pill appeared, he could step onto the peak of the world. I'm afraid you're dreaming. Now that you are still alive, it is only because I want to give you an even bigger surprise. Young Master Soulless, are you happy to see me? That's right. I, Ling Xiao, am the daddy heavenly Tao in your heart. If a scheming Tianming, who played with the world behind the scenes, knew that his fate was set up by someone else, no matter how tough his Tao heart was, it would definitely crumble to the ground. Ling Xiao did not know how Gue Wupu had been killed by Xia Feng in his previous life. However, it was clear that he had died with great reluctance. If the same thing happens again, do you think he will explode mentally? To be met with great sorrow in the midst of great joy. The human world is not worth it. Condense. Suddenly, Pill Elder let out a cold shout. Wind and clouds gathered between heaven and earth. A cloud of catastrophe descended from the sky. It turned into thunder will and enveloped the former. A strange medicinal fragrance instantly filled the air. Spiritual wind surged, and the sound of Tao resounded from the cauldron. The aura on Dan Lao's body finally relaxed from its tense state. In the next instant, the seal in his hand changed, causing the Tao cauldron before him to float up into the air and greet the tribulation lightning. A 7th grade elixir had been mixed with a trace of the rhythm of heaven and earth. Compared to the spiritual materials of heaven and earth, the spiritual energy it contained was even more terrifying. When the elixir was formed, It had to undergo the tempering of the lightning tribulation and condense the elixir pattern. Only then could it be considered to be completely born. There were even rumors that in ancient times, some peerless powerhouses had refined ninth-grade elixirs that could develop spiritual intelligence and transform into humans. Such a grade could no longer be described as a spiritual object. Boom! A bolt of catastrophe lightning pierced through the sky and struck the Tao cauldron down from the sky. The wind and clouds changed, like a tornado, from the sky to the earth. However, at this moment, there was no trace of panic on Pill Elder's face. Instead, there was a hint of joy. For an alchemist, there was nothing more exciting than the moment of the birth of a spiritual elixir. Even Gue Wupu's long and narrow eyes were surging with anticipation. Finally, his sovereign immortal path had completely opened at this moment. Buzz. The rich spiritual energy began to surge like the tide. The entire barren mountain was illuminated by a ray of seven-colored light. The fragrance of the elixir spread for hundreds of miles. Just a whiff of it would make one feel relaxed and happy. Ling Xiao stood in the sky with his hands behind his back. He looked at the gradually dissipating thunderclouds and the Jade by Ling elixir that suddenly appeared in Pill Elder's hand. The corner of his mouth finally curled up into a smile. Ha ha, this is great. Pill Elder, you are indeed the #1 alchemist in Shijiang. This elixir is the work of a celestial being. Gue Wupu laughed loudly and stared at Pill Elder with sparkling eyes. With this 7th-grade spiritual elixir, his cultivation could easily enter the 6th stage of the Divine King realm. At that time, the Soul Sea Seal and monstrous geniuses could be killed with a wave of his hand. You better remember what you promised me. Pill Elder snorted coldly. To be honest, it wasn't that he didn't want to swallow the spiritual elixir. A 7th-grade spiritual elixir was a heaven-defying fortune even for an emperor god. However, merging the spiritual elixir required time. If he did so, he was afraid that Gue Wupu would cut him open before the elixir could be merged. Don't worry, Pill Elder. Gue Wupu, never go back on my words. Gue Wupu's eyes were clear, and his face was resolute. Even Ling Xiao almost believed him when he saw the righteous look on Gue Wupu's face. All right. In the end, Pill Elder waved his hand and threw the 7th-grade spiritual elixir to Gue Wupu. However, just as Gue Wupu was about to reach out and take the spiritual elixir that was flying towards him from the sky suddenly disappeared mysteriously. Then, very suddenly, it disappeared with a whoosh. For a moment, Gue Wupu even thought that it was Pill Elder's doing. However, looking at the dazed look on Pill Elder's face, he was obviously surprised, until the sound of swallowing came from above their heads. Ling Xiao stood in the sky and directly put the 7th-grade spiritual elixir into his mouth and swallowed it. Not bad, not bad. Pill Elder's methods are still so exquisite. Ling Xiao, you are... Gue Wupu and Pill Elder raised their heads at the same time and looked at the young man standing on the clouds with a gentle face. Their eyes were filled with shock. At this moment, Ling Xiao's body was faintly filled with immortal light. Especially his clear eyes, which seemed to contain the truth of the great Tao, made people feel reverence when they looked at him. He just stood there, but it was as if he was one with the heavens and earth. No, it was as if the heavens and earth were under his feet. The Tao rhythm was heavenly, and he had the bearing of an immortal. Even with Gue Wupu and Pill Elder's divine soul realm, they did not realize that there was a third person hidden in this world. Moreover, looking at the young man, it seemed that he had been standing there for a long time. But who was Ling Xiao? Why was the flame fluctuation emitting from his body somewhat familiar? Of course, Ling Xiao deliberately released a wisp of the netherworld demonic flame's aura. Compared to Gue Wupu, he was more interested in this Pill Emperor of Shijiang. Originally, Ling Xiao planned to let Gue Wupu fuse and break through if Pill Elder's elixir was only a 6th-grade one. It would be easier for him to harvest the leaks. After all, the stronger the elixir, the better the effect of eating it. However, He did not expect this old man's skills to be so exquisite that he could directly refine a 7th-grade elixir. Was Gue Wupu worthy of eating such a divine item? F***CK. Of course, only Master Ling, the most righteous and most responsible person in the world, was qualified to eat it. Otherwise, it would be a blasphemy to pill Elder in the 7th-grade elixir. Beep, the destined child, is having a mental breakdown. Congratulations to the host for plundering 1,000 luck points and 10,000 villain points. You're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.